Thank you, Planning Committee. Councillor Snow. Told you I'd tell you when I wanted you to be quiet. Thank you. Welcome to the Planning Committee on Monday the 27th of March in the Rensrath room at Exeter City Council. First item on the agenda is apologies. Do we have any apologies?
Councillor Jobson, Chair.
Anybody know about Councillor Pole? Yeah, well. Thank you very much. First item on the agenda is to approve the minutes of the meeting. I'm going to let Howard have a little word with us about that because we've got some amendments to make.
Thanks, Chair. Just a very minor amendment. Page 13 of the minutes, the 3 top bullet points. The word report should be added at the beginning of 4 and 5, and the word application removed, and the word report placed in the 3rd bullet point. Thank you, Chair.
So I'm going to move that amendment. Would anybody like to second that? Thank you, Councillor Sutton. In which case, can I put them forward as an accurate report of the meeting? All those in favour? You weren't there for all of it. No. Fine. Thanks very much. So that'll be one abstention as well. Oh, neither was it. That's just accept that the bits you were there for were right, okay? All right, on the one with the change, I understand. Thank you very much. Declarations of interest, if you can declare those before the item that you're speaking to. Same rules as always. Please don't say things over and over again. Treat each other nicely. Remember, you've got to listen to the chair because I'm in charge. And those of you who are in the gallery, it's really difficult for us to hear if you keep shouting out, and even if you don't agree with what's being said. So if you could not do that, because I don't want to have to remove you from the gallery. Yeah, that's you, Councillor Warwick. No shouting out. Thank you. Thanks very much. First item on the agenda is planning application 22053 Outland at St Bridget's Nursery. Over to Christopher Cummings, please.
Thanks, Chair. So this is an outline application with all matters reserved except access for 350 dwellings at St Bridget's Nursery on Old Ryden Lane. This application was deferred at the last committee to allow for further discussions for potential improvements to 2 aspects of it: the junction between Old Ryden Lane and Ryden Lane, and a connection through third-party land to the IKEA roundabout in the northeast corner. In relation to the Ryden Lane junction, it's proposed to improve the raised table used by cyclists and pedestrians crossing Old Ryden Lane with increased steepness and use of coloured bricks to make it visually prominent and encourage vehicles to slow down on approach. The junction itself, the redesign of the junction itself was considered to be safe and suitable for access as was submitted, and these alterations are an additional benefit to this aspect of the development. In relation to a connection to the northeast to the IKEA roundabout, it's again noted that Devon Highways raised no objections to the access as submitted, and that this northeast access would not be required for this scheme to be considered acceptable in highways terms. A planning note was submitted by the applicant commenting on this and advising that the costs of creating the access through the third-party land was significant due to a ransom strip and would impact on the overall viability of the scheme. The area to the northeast is third-party land and falls outside of the developable land covered by the red line of this application, and therefore would not be able to necessarily be controlled by this application itself. It's the officer's view that the site continues to provide suitable and safe access as previously submitted, as well as suitable permeability north and south with the provision of cycle and pedestrian links. Whilst the connection to the northeast would be beneficial, it involves third-party land that is outside the remit of this application, and a connection to the site boundary in that area is proposed. The recommendation to committee following the deferral and further discussions is therefore to grant conditionally subject to the Section 106 agreement. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? Councillor Moore.
Thank you. So your discussions have resulted in a small change to the cycling access. Were there any discussions about bus routes to and from and through the site? Obviously, it pointed out that there was going to be discussions about bus routes through it in reserved matter stage, but obviously there has to be a bus to and from in order to get to that point.
Bear with me 1 second. I just need to find the bits that I wrote it down on. There are bus routes in the surrounding area, and they are. Oh, no, it's not, sorry, bear with me, I haven't got it written down in this one. There are bus routes in the surrounding area that were considered to be acceptable. In terms of bus links through the site, at this point, we don't know what the final design of the site will be, but it is expected that that main road through the site would be suitable for bus traffic to be going through it.
Thank you, Chair. In the light of the issue of the third-party land, when it comes to the detailed layout of the site, is it possible for the layout to take account that at some future date, that ownership of land might come in, be available to complete that route? So in other words, we don't get a finished design that never allows any connection to be made.
Yes, so this, it's quite hard to see on this one, but there is a requirement for a connection to the site boundary to be done. And it's forming part of the, I think it's forming part of the Section 106 agreement, as well as conditions that is a requirement with it.
So this is indicative, so obviously subject, but in the Section 106 agreement, we said that it has to be up along this part of the site to connect it with it there.
Any further questions? No, thank you. In which case, I've got Neil Thorne speaking in favour of the application. If you'd like to come to the front, you get 3 minutes. I'll let you know when you've gone over time, and you need to press the button that sort of looks like someone shouting.
Can you hear me? Good evening, Chair. Good evening, members. My name is Neil Thorne, and I'm a director at Stantec and the applicant's highways consultant. I'm here today as highway issues were raised at the last committee, and I want to ensure that I address any residual queries that you may have in order that you're in an informed position to positively vote on this application in line with the officer's recommendation. You've heard from Mr. Cummings that the proposal is considered sustainable development in accordance with the NPPF, and that the principle of residential development at this site has already been confirmed by the council due to its allocation in the local plan, as well as being proposed for development in the new draft local plan. You've also heard from Mr. Cummings and Mr. Sutherland that the detailed transport assessment confirms that there are no inherent safety concerns in the local area, including at the Ryden Lane, Old Ryden Lane junction. Indeed, the proposals provide improvements for all road users at the junction, most notably for pedestrians and cyclists. The proposal is subject to an independent road safety audit. The traffic generated by the proposed development does not constitute a severe impact. Vehicular access to the northeast is not necessary to make the application acceptable, with the application presenting a suitably safe and acceptable access strategy. The site's considered accessible with bus stops on New Court Way, as you've just heard, served by services I and J. It's a 40-minute walk from New Court Railway Station and has a wide range of local facilities and amenities within walking distance. And all matters have been agreed with the Highway Authority, who have raised no objection to the application and agree that it's in accordance with the NPPF and the development plan. You've heard this evening that the proposals provide significant benefits to the local area. Its policy requirement for affordable housing of 35%, delivering up to 122 much needed affordable homes, as well as other significant benefits through the 106 and seal contributions. From a highways perspective, these benefits include new direct ped and cycle connections across the site, improving the permeability of the whole New Court area, safety improvements for all users at the Ryden Lane, Old Ryden Lane junction, improvements for all road users along Old Ryden Lane itself, and a mobility hub on site open to existing and new residents, providing electric car clubs, e-bike hire, EV charging and cycle parking. In addition, the development will deliver an access road and ped cycle connection to the northeast boundary of the scheme. This would enable a future connection when the third-party landowner comes forward with their application. Waterton Park, as the applicant, is committed to delivering the development. I would highlight that the application has been with the council since April 22. This is an outline application for a residential development of a long allocated site. We would therefore invite members to determine the application at the local level. And for the reasons set out, we would encourage you to vote in support of the application this evening. Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions? Councillor Hannaford, then Moore, then you.
Thank you, Chair. It's really to touch upon the point that Mr. Cummings raised. In my view, to make this development really sustainable, it will need a bus to travel through this large residential area. So, and I understand, this isn't outlying, but from my experience, when housing developments progress, the roads get narrow, and things like bin lorries can't get through, and possibly even buses as well. So, just really just to get your assurance that once it's completed, a bus service will go through it. Because I think it's too much to expect people to walk down or catch it on the periphery. The public transport needs to actually go into the residential area.
Thank you. So 2 points. This is obviously part of the wider New Court master plan. So through that master planning approach, the public transport strategy was set. That set the public transport corridors along New Court Way, for instance, in this location. And those bus stops on New Court Way, they're only 500 metres from the centre of the site. So they're within a perfectly reasonable walking distance for residents if those bus services were to remain onto New Court Way. That said, because with bus routes and bus services, you never know how networks change over time. And certainly with schemes I've worked on over the last 25 years, networks change over time. So what we've agreed to do, and again, this can be secured, is ensure that those main streets through the development are built at least 6.2 metres wide, which is wide enough to allow for a two-way bus movement at low speed, appropriate speeds for a residential development. So we've, I don't like to use the word future-proof, but we've designed the scheme to accommodate those future changes should they come about.
Thank you.
Councillor Moore?
Thank you. Like Councillor Hannaford, I'm a fan of buses.
Good.
And so I just want to follow up on that point, because I'm speaking from memory now, but from the previous time we considered this, the distance for the bus stops was at the limit of the average distance in the southwest for someone walking to a bus stop, but that was measured from the edge of the site, not the centre of the site. So if there's no bus stops in the site, because all the buses, the I and J, go the other way round to IKEA and another side, there's no bus here. So what discussions have you had with the county or Stagecoach about rerouting the bus to guarantee that it, because this is basically a car dependent development. So I'm really very concerned that there isn't a plan for sustainable travel with buses, cycling and walking that are real options, because walking is very difficult too.
Thank you. Firstly, I would politely disagree with your assertion that the scheme is car dependent. This is an incredibly sustainable location for a residential development. A huge amount of local facilities and amenities within 800 metres even, or let alone a 15-minute sort of walkable neighbourhood of the site. Within the scheme, we're committed to meeting requirements for cycle parking standards, but we're going over and above that. Working with officers, we've devised the requirements for a mobility hub, which will give new residents, but also existing residents in the local area, the opportunities to use alternative modes of transport. In terms of public transport, whilst we've not had any detailed discussions with the operators, we have had those conversations with officers at the local highway authority. At the moment, the preference for the public transport network is to retain those buses on New Court Way as the most efficient network within that whole New Court master plan. And sort of 500-metre walk distance to the local bus stop is certainly within walking distance of buses. There's a lot of research that's been done about maximum walking distances, and we're sort of nowhere near those sort of limits of walking. So the bus is available for those that need them. We're making improvements to Old Ryden Lane to make it safer for people to walk to and from the bus stops on Old Ryden Lane. But there's also bus stops around the site in other locations should they choose to use a different bus service, for instance. So I think this is a prime location, a really accessible development for modes other than the private car. I'm confident that this is not a car dependent development, and the strategy, the master plan, the infrastructure that we're putting in is all in there. Circular 0120 compliant cycle infrastructure as part of that access strategy. All of that to encourage sustainable modes of transport.
And Councillor Newby.
Thank you. The main access and egress is on the junction of Old Ryden Lane and Ryden Lane. Is that right?
Correct. Yes.
Have you monitored the traffic volume that approaches that junction during summer periods, without tourists coming down to disperse towards Dawlish and Plymouth, place like that don't use the motorway? It's going to be a quite busy junction, is it not?
So we've looked at lots of traffic data in that area in order to assess the impact of the development. The actual capacity of that junction is far in excess of actually what is needed to serve this development. So there's not even approaching a capacity concern at this junction. The improvements that we're making are the improvements to the design of the junction, not only to provide access, but to provide better facilities for pedestrians and cyclists rather than any capacity increases. But we're comfortable. Devon County Council, as the local highway authority, have rigorously tested our assessment, the modelling work that was undertaken at the time of the planning application. They're satisfied that the work we've done demonstrates that there isn't an impact at this junction or indeed across the wider network.
Thank you.
Okay, in that case, if there are no more questions, we're going to. Oh, Councillor Moore.
So I just wanted to know if they could follow up on the suggestion from our speaker here, I'm sorry, I've forgotten your name, about the bus, the size of the road for buses, although I can't really see how it. Can we leave that with planning officers? But I do think there needs to be a viable road for buses.
So we could put a condition on for the main road to state that the primary road through the site has to be suitable for two-way bus traffic, which is a similar condition to the one that's on the outline for the next matter that's coming up for Oldness Farm.
Yes.
Sorry, yes.
In that case, I'm about to open the debate, but before I do, does anyone have any further questions for officers? No? In that case, I am going to, she says with very little confidence, move the recommendation. Would anybody like to second that? Thank you. Councillor Sutton, the debate is now open. No one wants to talk? Councillor Hannaford.
Thank you, Chair. I think, I'm in agreement with your recommendation because I think it is, providing it's got that bus link, a sustainable development. Again, we have to highlight the fact that it's got a good, proper allocation of affordable housing, which we know we're desperately short of in the city. And I think we must go with that. There is again one of our usual concerns, the contribution for play areas in here, which is important. And I think we should support this. And I think a lot of the concerns that have been raised, and I think there's 70 odd objections around the junction, hopefully will be solved with some of the developer contributions that are actually coming into as part of the development. It's almost as if we're getting the improvements to the junction we needed through the development, which I think, again, to me, answers most of those objections. And again, I would reiterate what's been said about the viability of the bus connectivity of the site, because with respect to yourself, it might be somebody's worked out X amount of the journey time, but that isn't if you've got mobility issues or disability, or you're carrying shopping with small children, etc. I think the distance to a suitable bus stop is a movable feast, Chair. Thank you.
I'm sorry. Got your name, Mr. Thorne. I'm doing it as well. You're allowed to go back now. You don't have to stay. I realise we've kept you back for the debate. Yeah, no, you can go. Sorry, my fault for not saying it. Councillor Sutton.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I reading this updated report, it seems that the concerns that were raised at the last discussion of this by members have all been fully addressed through discussions between the officers and the applicant, and the answers that have come back on this revised report may not be what we wanted to see, but these are the answers that we have got to the questions that we asked, and as we're all only too aware, none of us and neither Mr. Thorne has any control over Stagecoach and the provision of buses. So the best that we can do is to make sure that as and when Stagecoach realises that this is appropriate for a bus route, that they can actually get their buses up and down the road and along the estate. So I have to say I was shocked to read the response about the ransom strip, third-party land to the northeast, but it's absolutely abundantly clear that we can't put
a condition that is that is out with the control of the applicant to actually enforce. So I welcome the fact that the potential connection at the edge of the site is there. We can only hope that common sense prevails, and in due course this reasonable and sensible connection comes forward. But in the light of that, I will be supporting the recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Did anybody else want to speak? Okay, so I'm going to make sure we understand what we're voting for. So the recommendation was as it stands in your documentation, with the added condition that two buses can move both ways, as mentioned. You were what? Hello.
Sorry. Because of the way that the road is configured, it goes into a one-way system.
Right.
Two-way bus traffic will probably not be suitable for this particular scheme. So I would recommend saying that it's suitable for bus traffic, and then it will have to meet highway standards, and depending on whether we need turning areas for buses or anything like that.
And Ben, you're happy that that's something workable for what is the intention of this committee?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Okay, thank you. Okay, so if everybody's happy with that, could all those in favour please raise their hand?
11 in favour.
All those against?
1 against.
And no abstentions. Okay, we're just going to have a couple of minutes talking amongst ourselves because our poor officer tonight is doing pretty much everything and he just needs to get the right paperwork out and everything. So just have a moment and we'll be at Oldness Farm in a minute, okay? Next item on the agenda, people. Does no one listen to I shout? It's like being at home with my kids. As soon as she's shouting, we won't pay attention. Right, the next item on the agenda is item number 6, planning application 221454 Res, land at Oldness Farm, West Shillingford Road, Exeter. Can I ask that people remember to put their microphones on, because if you're sitting at the back, they haven't heard anything you said if your mic wasn't on. So we just need to make sure we speak up so they can hear you. Thank you very much. Over to Chris.
Thank you, Chair. Following the additional information sheet, one additional objection has been submitted, which raised issues with the proposed housing mix for the scheme. It noted that the report states 1, 2, 3, and 4 bed dwellings for this. This scheme is actually for 1, 2, and 4 bed dwellings, so no 3 bed dwellings. So this application is a reserved matters application for 182 dwellings following an outline application granted in September 2021. The site itself is a 4.1 hectare site, currently split into 2 fields, with hedgerow bordering each of the fields. To the west is Shillingford Road, and access was approved at outline consent for this site onto Shillingford Road. To the north is Veitch Gardens, and to the east is an additional site allocated for development as part of the South Alphington expansion. To the immediate south is Markham Lane and land under Teignbridge Council, which is undergoing significant development at the moment. I'll just flick back to this one so you can see where the site boundary ends in relation to the fields that are there at the moment. There have been 75 now objections to the proposal, with the primary objection in relation to the density of the development and subsequent impacts on the surrounding area. As such, this is the area I'll be focusing on in relation to this presentation. The outline consent did not set a maximum. Oh, that one. That's the right side. My bad. Terribly sorry. Should really look at these things as I do it. So the associate outline consent did not set any maximum number of dwellings in the description or in any conditions on it. The indicative plans and the initial access assessment showed 116 dwellings, which has given an expectation of a much lower density development in this area. However, there is nothing preventing a development of a higher density coming forward at this reserve matter stage, subject to it being acceptable on all other material considerations. In terms of the density, this scheme has a total site density of 43.75 DPH, dwellings per hectare. The Alphington development brief, which covers this and the wider area, it covers this, not that one, the field there to the right of it, and across to the east across Chudley Road in the brief. That's noted that levels of 30 DPH would be the minimum expected, with lower densities at the north and southern parts of the site. So as I said, this has got a density of 43.75 DPH, which is considered to be in keeping with that of the surrounding area, which is seeing significant building work to the south and southwest. So this is the outline for the southwest Exeter development. The highlighted area in yellow in the top is this application site. Plots 6. So the entirety of that, not including this highlighted site, is for 1,365 dwellings with a local centre and other facilities. The sites immediately to the south, plot 16A is 94 dwellings at a density of 35.2 DPH, and plot 16B is 163 dwellings at a density of 40.4 DPH. I've also got some details on the surrounding area in Alphington, which I can provide if needed. Oh, actually, I've written it here, sorry. In the surrounding areas, noted the density levels in the design brief, the Alphington design brief, state 20 DPH for areas of Vestry Gardens, Chudley Road and Steeple Drive, and 54 DPH for areas of Lichgate Road and Tower Walk. So that's existing development, not that one, on the other side of Chudley Road to the east. On balance, it's considered that its level density is similar to that of the surrounding area and is acceptable in principle. In relation to the access, this was approved to outline based on the 116 dwellings. A revised transport assessment was submitted with this proposal based on the new dwelling numbers and examined by Devon Highways. It was found that the approved access is still suitable for this increase in number of dwellings and that there is suitable capacity on the surrounding highway network. The development itself is a mix of 1, 2 and 4 bed dwellings, including 2 blocks of flats. The general site plan follows the indicative road network that was shown at the outline consent. And there have been a number of meetings with the developer and various consultees that have seen revisions to the plans to change the appearance, reduction in height, revised car parking arrangements, and so on. In line with a condition on the outline consent and a section 106 requirement. 10% of the site is public open space, and there is a play park in the northern corner, northern side of it. In the same place it says LEAP on the left framework plan there. The dwelling will meet the nationally described space standards, and it's considered they will provide a suitable level of amenity for occupants. And due to the positioning and design of the site, they won't generate any significant amenity impacts on dwellings outside the site. The site is bordered by hedgerow, and there were comments about whether this would be removed as part of this scheme. The hedgerow is being retained and enhanced where possible. There are a couple of areas where access will be put through it, but that is for the 2 roads going through and for access, the pedestrian cycle accesses. A number of objections were made that include matters that were covered by the outline consent, and I believe because of the number that mentioned it, it's important to mention it here as well. There was a thought that a connection to Chudley Road would be made as part of this application. To show you. But that is in third-party land. As part of this scheme, they will be building a road suitable for 2-way bus traffic up to the site boundary, but then the connection itself to Chudley Road will form part of a future application. There was also comments about whether there was pedestrian access being delivered on Shillingford Road itself. As part of this scheme, there is a pre-occupation condition on the outline consent that requires a footway to be installed all the way along the western boundary along Shillingford Road from the very top all the way to Markham Lane. There's an existing Section 106 agreement as part of the outline consent, which includes a 30% affordable housing delivery, which is held up as part of this scheme, as well as contributions towards education, medical, and the local highway network and education. In conclusion, whilst there is an increase in density compared to the indicative levels shown at outline stage, it's been demonstrated that the site can accommodate this increase. The development will provide a suitable level of amenity for occupants and is therefore recommended to the committee for conditional approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Anyone else have any questions? Councillor Hannaford, Councillor Newby, Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Chair. Two points. On page 108, under material considerations, in terms of section 106 contribution, on the previous application, there was £719.79 per dwelling for special educational needs provision, but there isn't on this development. So could I query, and apologies if I've missed it somewhere, but I think we need special educational needs contributions everywhere, obviously, as we've got a multi-million-pound overspend on it at the moment. So that's the first one. Yes, please.
So in terms of Section 106, we wouldn't necessarily be able to add anything to it now because the outline consent has already been granted. If it is included on the outline consent, on the outline Section 106, and it may be that I just missed it on there, I don't have a copy of the Section 106 with me. I don't think. I've got a copy of the decision notice, not the Section 106. It might be that it is on there, but we wouldn't be able to add anything in now, unfortunately, if it had been missed on the outline consent.
So, Chair, if I would leave that to you, but I mean, obviously the concern is if it has been missed off, why has it been missed off? And if we can find it, because as you know, and I spent a lot of time on this, is that obviously we were, this is a really important service and we're running a big deficit. So we must not miss any opportunities in Devon to get that funding in.
I'm going to let the director explain the situation.
So the critical thing, I'm not disputing what you're saying there, Councillor Hannaford, but this development's already got planning permission. What we're considering tonight is some conditions to do with the reserve matters. So we can't revisit any aspects of what you're considering. I think we can absolutely double check, go back to the planning permission that was granted to see what was in that in terms of the 106. We can't retrospectively add anything to it.
Okay.
That makes sense. And it's also something obviously for us to watch moving forward.
Yeah.
I think that goes without saying.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So the second point I've got, you alluded to the sites in terms of there were some flats. am I correct in assuming that the flats that are proposed for this site will be the social housing? Or will the social housing include houses and be pepper potted through the site?
The social housing is in the flat, and it also includes dwellings split throughout the site, spread throughout it. So there is a mix throughout it all.
Thank you.
Okay, I think I said Councillor Newby next.
If we're expecting more density in this established application, does that mean that the size of the gardens will be smaller? And if so, by how much? Thank you.
So the majority of gardens meet the minimum requirements set out in the residential design SPD. There are a number that are just below it, and tweaks have been done to the boundaries to increase the size where possible. It's felt that on balance, the majority of them would meet the requirements, and it wouldn't be a strong enough reason for refusal for a few of them to be under.
Councillor Moore.
Thank you. I've got a few questions, if that's all right. So can you tell me the number of cars per household? That was the first question. The second question. Do you want me to give the list, or do you want me to one at a time? Number of cars per household, please.
I don't have the figures for cars per household, but the parking levels that are proposed are in line with the residential design guide requirements, and no objections were raised from Devon Highways on the level proposed.
Okay, so that's 2 per household.
I think it's meant to be 1.4 per household,
okay.
but yeah.
Okay, thank you. So can I just clarify? I wasn't quite clear in the document. The leap and the green space next to it are they both designed to be SUDs? So from the urban design guide report, it seemed to suggest that the leap was also a SUD, and therefore potentially the amenity of the leap would be reduced because it could be very wet in order to cope with excess water.
So the leap itself is not part of the drainage system. The drainage area is there's a hedge running through the centre of the site there. The drainage ditch area is to the left of that hedge. That will be open for public use as and when it's usable, but there is no proposal for the leap to be used for drainage in any way. It will have sort of play facilities built into it.
Okay, that's good, thank you. My next question is about the trees on the east side. Some of those have TPOs, and obviously the trees are integral to the hedgerow. So will they be protected? Because quite often those houses are built quite close. Will they be protected on the site in short term and in the long term?
There aren't actually any tree preservation orders on those trees that I saw when I was doing research on it. But the trees are all proposed to be retained. There's root protection areas and tree protection measures in place for it during the construction, and access areas to allow for maintenance to them. As part of it, our ecologist has recommended a specific biodiversity construction management plan to ensure that there's definitely every measure possible to protect all these features on the boundaries during the construction.
Thank you. My last question. I believe our policy for affordable housing is 35%, and this proposal with increased number of dwellings has reduced proportion of affordable housing. So why aren't they bringing forward a higher proportion?
The outline consent and the Section 106 was agreed at 30%. So it's not something we would be able to change at this stage.
Okay, sorry, I do have one more question. Okay, so there's a point in the report about there's the condition to connect to district heating is now going to be dropped because there isn't going to be any district heating. So therefore, what will happen to the money that would have been earmarked for that activity, for that part of the work? Would that money not be the money that could be alternatively diverted to cover the issues that Councillor Hannaford raised?
the section 106 wouldn't, as I said, wouldn't be able to be altered at this stage because it's a reserved matters consent.
It says here that it's going to be removed. You're going to remove the section 106 requirement, conditioning linking up to the district heating at the incinerator.
That aspect cannot be is not possible to be fulfilled through this, so it's not considered they would be able to connect to a district heating network as part of this scheme.
Okay.
We wouldn't be able to change any money or put any money into anything else, as it's all calculated on the volume of people in the area. So it's all done on a per dwelling level.
So really good question, Councillor. I've not seen the precise wording of the Section 106 agreement that's attached to the planning permission, but normally they're worded in quite some detail in terms of the implementability of any clauses. So there would, I would imagine, without reading that one, there will be clauses in there about if it's not possible to connect to a district heating network, then that obligation falls away. That's quite normal. So they write these things to allow for different scenarios.
Thank you, Chair. Could I follow up on the second paragraph on page 119, which deals with the parking issue or the solution to the parking on the site? Considering there's been now an increase in density on this development, therefore there'll be an increase in the number of vehicles accessing, using the site. You already pointed out that the average space allowed is 1.4 per dwelling. I assume that, does that relate to the occupants of the house, or does that include visitors to the site spaces to be allowed? Could you inform me what percentage of the car parking spaces are off-road and what percentage do they intend to be on-road? Because often you get on these estates very narrow roads which then get blocked either side and nobody can get through with them. So I just want to be assured that the parking is off, that there's a free flow of traffic, and we aren't going to get a site that 2 years' time is going to be totally log jammed with vehicles parking both sides of the road.
So there was a lot of interesting debate with our urban designer about on and off street parking as part of this application. There is a high level of off street parking proposed. The level of parking required varies depending on the number of bedrooms and things like that. But it is quite hard to see on this, but the majority is located off road. There are also dedicated visitor bays. And on the last set of plans that came through, that was increased as well to ensure there was more visitor space available. I don't have the percentages available, unfortunately, but the majority are off-road parking spaces.
Right then, that's the end of the question section. So I'm going to bring forward two councillors speaking under standing order number 44. I've got councillors Atkinson and Warwick down to speak. You can fight amongst yourself who's going first. You've been here before, Councillor Atkinson, but you also know that you don't have a time limit, but we do encourage you to be concise in what you say. Thank you. Thank you, members. Just push on through, okay. When this first came for outline planning permission, I supported it subject to concerns about traffic and pedestrian safety. As you know, Shillingford Road is quite a hazardous road with only one pavement going down one side, so there will be another pavement on part of the road. So it's still a very dangerous road. And I can, Atkinson, before you, in the nicest way, waste your time explaining about the access has already been agreed. Yes. So we can't do anything about the access. I have no intention of mentioning the access. I'm just talking so the road. About, yeah, that's already been agreed. The roads outside stuff. Okay, it has been agreed. I'm not going to talk about access. Thank you. I consider the design and density now to be inappropriate to the location. The National Planning Framework says that in achieving suitable densities, area-based character assessment should be used to help ensure that the land is used efficiently while also creating beautiful and sustainable places. I was a bit shocked to hear that the planning officer is saying that densities in Teambridge should be used to compare as a comparison with densities here. Densities in Alphington are not at the same level as
as the densities in the new developments in Teignbridge. And they're not part of Alphington Village, they are Teignbridge. Therefore, it's more appropriate to consider the densities set out in the Alphington brief in 2014 and the designs in that. So I say that this submission with the increased density, whilst claiming to make effective use of land, I think it's making effective use of property profits by creating high densities which will affect the safety of people and pedestrians and cyclists in Shillingford Road, as that is the only entrance in. And I think that this kind of density is not appropriate to this area and was not considered in the development brief. So I take issue with the planning statement that the proposed development has been designed with a thorough understanding of the site and its context. It's been designed, it hasn't been designed with Alphington in mind, it's been designed with Teignbridge in mind, so it seems. And so in particular, the development brief, which was agreed by this council, I believe should be the guiding document in how we develop this site. And it looks at a much lower density at different areas in this site. So I think in order to respect the character and appearance of the neighbouring residential areas which are in Alphington, these areas along the northern and southern boundaries of the site should be developed at a much lower density of 20 dwellings per hectare, whilst perhaps with an overall density of 30 for the whole site, not at the proposed 45 and above, which is considered in this application. The text also of the brief says that no buildings on the site should exceed 2 stories in height, and it's noted that the building heights plan shows some houses at 2.5 stories, which look practically 3 stories to me. And I think that the design is inappropriate. Also, the relationship with Markham Lane in the design has been ignored in the submission. The brief requires that sections must be submitted showing how the relationship and impact on the skyline is dealt with, and I don't think this has been dealt with appropriately here. I won't go on to tree planting. I don't believe it deals adequately with tree planting on the site. And also I don't believe at the moment that there is maximum permeability of the site. I know that the houses, not all houses can be occupied until there is permeability through to Chudley Road, and perhaps I hope the officers will confirm that what was said at the outline stage is still appropriate. So I think that a looser density is more appropriate to this site. Also, in the Markham's Lane, the text refers to houses, is in the brief, that houses must be oriented to face the lane to provide natural surveillance. If the current approach is allowed, the opportunity for Markham's Lane to be a safe and secure walking, cycling route will be lost, especially if the land of the south is developed in a similar fashion. At present, houses backing onto the land will turn this route into an unsafe space. We currently have a Safer City campaign for women's safety, and I think if you've got a dark lane adjoining a housing there for walkers and cyclists, you might be designing in unsafety. So the National Planning Framework says we should develop sites which promote healthy and safe communities, and I don't believe that this does. I was going to also mention the increased density would have an effect on school places. We know that Alphington Primary School is already oversubscribed, as is Westex, and the new through school at Matford Brook has been designed to cater for a lower density of 2,500 houses, not this increased pressure that we're now seeing taking in overall. So I think we're designing having this density for a community which will cause problems for families and schools in particular, and not to mention the impact on community infrastructure, including schools and GPs and community facilities. We know that the community facilities in the village are already stretched at maximum, as is the GP surgery there. I think that a lower density will help support community infrastructure, and would suggest that we should only approve something which complies with the Alphington brief, which was our promise to the community, that we would take that into account when giving planning permission. So in summary, I believe this application ignores the context of the surrounding area of Alphington design brief, and the density of houses in Alphington is too dense. It is too dense, and ignores the development's brief's limitations on story height, and also doesn't give enough information to ensure that biodiversity in hedges and trees, I think, will be maintained. Has a poor relationship with Markham's Lane. For all of these reasons, I believe that this application should be refused, and there should be a redesign to a lower density, more in keeping with Alphington Village. Thank you.
We usually ask if anyone's got any questions for you, Councillor Atkinson. Any questions? Councillor Hanford.
Councillor Atkinson, the officer alluded to the modelling that had been done in terms of the car ownership on the development and how it would work, and would it be enough if once this is built or part of it is built and cars start overspilling from the estate, is there anywhere in that sort of general area for them to actually go? Would it be safe? How would that affect the existing area and some of those adjoining areas?
They'd have to go onto Shillingford Lane and Smithfield. I mean, because of the permeability, that's the only way out, and that's how they would go. And obviously, if you've got 1.4, you increase the density per house, you've got more cars going down through the village. That's their exit route. Wherever they want to go, they have got to go through the village. So he's just going to make it more hazardous down Shillingford Road.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Warwick, are you coming forward? Same rules as with Yvonne. You can speak for as long as you like, but we do encourage you to be concise.
About 3 or 4 hours, that was all, Chair.
Try not to make any points that have already been made while you're there.
Apologies for the fragility. I've just got over COVID, so don't want any sympathy by Alex here, so I won't get any anyway. Right, so start with this one. Chair, I suspect this is an exercise in well, let me put it this way. Whatever I say tonight, I suspect will make little difference to, as I've heard what the planners have said. So but all the same, I think it's important, and I've got a vested interest here because I live in Shillingford Road. This is where I live, and I've seen so many changes, and in particular in recent times. I used to brag that I lived on the edge of the countryside. That luxury is gradually being taken away from me. Now, I understand that people need homes, but what I would say to you is this, is people do need homes. But it's not just the people who are coming into that area that need homes and need a decent environment to live in. It's also the existing people within that area. That particular field, to tell you a bit about that field, that was actually part of the old Veitch Nursery. That was where Veitches used to grow the trees and things that they then sold in the nursery. So it's got a bit of history to it. There's never, as far as I can ever remember, been any crops on that field. Sheep, yeah, plenty of sheep. First year I was a councillor, I had a complaint from a woman who lived up there, complained about the noise from the sheep, and I gently pointed out that if you move in next to a field full of sheep, you just might hear one or two of them. But that's the, that was the way it was. That field is actually, it's laid kind of fallow for a long time. It's not part of some of the fields around Alphington. It's absolute vandalism, and God knows where food security comes in, because we're actually seeing a lot of good agricultural, high quality agricultural land being churned up for development. People need houses. That particular field, though, as far as I know, has laid fallow now for many years. And as a consequence of that, it has a very high and rich diversity in wildlife, not just fauna, but fauna and flowers and mammals, let's put it that way. Birds, and I know myself from going up there and walking around over many years, that it is a nesting site for bats. There are a lot of bats up there. And I would ask that whatever we do and whatever we decide here, we look after the bats, because the bats in Alphington, there's a huge colony, and they really do need to be looked after. What you need to remember is that this isn't an isolated field. This is a field that is part of such a huge development, such a, as I pointed out before, such a churning up of the good farmland that's around Alphington. And then on top of that, Bridget have now come up with another plan to sell a bit more of the good agricultural land off and chuck houses up on that in the not too distant future, both here and, as we know, out in Exeter as well. Exeter's becoming like almost like an urban snowball that developers and other councils seem to just attach everything to, without much of the amenities, facilities and infrastructure that's needed to take that. And that's the important thing. If you look at page 100 on that report, and it goes on to a page 103, just that way down, they are all of the issues that the local people sought concerned about. Now, it says there that there's 74 objections, and we've got told tonight actually there's 75. It's a darn sight more than that. There's a hell of a lot of people who complained to me they couldn't get onto that website, including myself, by the way. It wouldn't take the password that I've always used. So there's more than that. Now, this isn't NIMBYism. This isn't NIMBYism. This is people who are genuinely concerned about what is going on with this particular site, and the fact that the increase in density, and it might fit the criteria, and criteria matters so much, doesn't it? But it may fit that criteria, but it worries people. Because at the end of the day, what we build on that field, and by the way, that is the last piece of agricultural land in Alphington, and therefore within the borders of Exeter. The last piece. And what we do with that matters to people. And what they're saying is that they are concerned about the density. They are already concerned about the traffic. Now, I know that Devon County love to draw up these mythical traffic flow predictions and things like that. Oh, they're wonderful. They're pure bloody fairy stories, but they're wonderful. And we are in Alphington at the moment. It took me tonight. I had to come in by car because the bus never turned up, and which is quite normal. And it took me over 20 minutes to get from out of Alphington onto, and that is the real reality of the road. It's not just within Alphington. It's the strip between Alphington and the city centre, Alphington Road and places like that. And this is what is concerning the people here. Now, you know, I understand it fits the criteria. I understand that at the end of the day that you'll probably vote it through. But what I would ask is that you do give some thought to the people of Alphington who have bothered to write all of those things. And I hope, I mean, the trouble is with that, when you see a list like that, it becomes a shopping list, doesn't it? It becomes just a list of issues. But actually, when you dig into that, there are some real and genuine concerns. We talked about Markham Lane, another historical site. Markham Lane is actually called Hangman's Lane, and it's where the condemned used to walk from the bottom, from the prison, which still stands at the bottom, to the top. These are famous places within Exeter and obviously within Alphington. So what I would say to you, and I apologise if I'm a bit stop-start tonight, but as I say, I've just got over COVID and I'm in a slightly weakened state. I'm not going for the sympathy vote at all here. I'm just saying that. But people are concerned about the traffic flows in Alphington. They are concerned about the densities. They are concerned about the environment that we end up living in. So I'd ask you to consider that. One other thing I'd ask the planners is not only to put pavements in Shillingford Road, but a crossing as well. Shillingford Road, as Yvonne rightly says, is an extremely dangerous road. It is not a dead end. It is a through road. And though it's 20 miles an hour, 40 is more likely the norm along there. And it would be a good idea if from the new site, to protect the people on that site, we could have some kind of proper crossing across that road. Chair, I won't keep you any longer. But as I say, that's what I have to say. Oh, yeah, just one more thing. Chair, the other thing that people are very concerned about is the local shop within Alphington. It's already very difficult to park there, to go in and out of the spa there. And there are concerns, more and more people that move into the area, obviously that. So people are looking as well for some shop, some amenities as well would be very, very welcome in that area.
Thank you, Councillor Warwick. Does anyone have any questions for Councillor Warwick? No, you get off with that one. Thank you very much.
Well, I'm glad I've silenced you all.
It's rarely done, Councillor Warwick, rarely done. Okay, we've got 2 people speaking, members of the public speaking tonight. We've got Jet speaking first, which is Juliet Meadowcroft. I am fairly confident that Mrs. Meadowcroft knows what she's doing, and I don't need to explain the 3-minute system to her, but just to remind you, you have 3 minutes.
Yes, before I start, can I just say I'm very sorry. I'm going to have to read this awfully quickly because there's so much of importance, and it was really hard to get it into a sort of nutshell.
Okay.
So be lenient. Okay. You may well think, because the Alphington Village Forum has opposed all the previous planning applications for the Oldness Farm West site, that we are NIMBYs, but we're certainly not. We understand that more houses are needed and that the Southwest Exeter development, including 2 sites in our village, was approved some years ago. We're not fighting against the principle of development, but against the effects it causes, if not done in a reasonable way, taking into account the surrounding areas, the capacity of the local roads, and the existing residents. This revised application is not at all reasonable, as it nearly doubles the density that was approved in the outline plans, which can only be down to making more profit. The other Southwest Exeter site being developed in our village has nearly half the density of this one. As you may know, thanks to a former head of development, Richard Short, the Forum spent many hours in 5 workshops with your planners and Devon County Council in order to produce an Alphington development brief as a supplementary planning document in 2014. Telia Homes appears to have ignored this important document as well as the 74 objections from residents on your planning portal, as they're not included in their consultee response tracker. They have responded to 56 objections made by official consultees, but there's not one single response to the residents' objections, which just proves how little they care about our views or our welfare, or that of future residents who will have to live in this crammed space with no available space in the school or surgery nearby. The new local centre will be at least a kilometre away. Our brief states that the site must make an excellent contribution to the character and appearance of Alkington, but this would be impossible with 182 houses squeezed onto 2 small fields, the equivalent of 4.5 football pitches, the half consisting of parking spaces. Our brief also states that it must have its own sense of place whilst integrating with existing development in the vicinity, which will not happen with such a high density, tall blocks and tiny gardens, 22 of which are below the recommended size. People need green space, but this is difficult to achieve when so many houses are built close together. I thought this council was keen on having more green space and fewer carbon emissions. Another big problem is the traffic congestion from which our village is already suffering on a regular basis, especially when there's a problem on the A38 or M5. Chudley Road is the most direct route into Exeter from the southwest, and we now have another 2,500 new houses being built all around us with no new infrastructure. Approximately 270 of these would be high up on the same Shillingford Road, a narrow hill, just above the Tillier development, and on top of that we have the horrific proposal by Teambridge to build another 900 houses further up this hill, Markham Village, named after the farm they are destroying. The Highways Authority never looks at the bigger picture when all these 6,000 new residents occupy their homes, probably possessing 2 cars each. For every single planning application, they state there's plenty of capacity on our roads. There's no point in telling people they must get out of their cars, as this is not going to happen. Our one and only bus service is unreliable, and cycle paths do not and cannot exist as the roads are too narrow and dangerous. I was just going to say, please turn it down. Thank you very much for hearing me.
Any questions at all? Oh, just a minute. There's got some questions for you, if that's okay. You can walk away if you don't want to do them. That is unlikely. Councillor Moore.
Thank you very much. You've mentioned, as did Councillor Atkinson, about character and appearance, and you commented about that, talking about density. But do you have any view on the potential designs that have been presented?
No, I can't honestly say I have. I think as long as they adhere to the development brief, they'll be absolutely fine. But I'm not sure what they're planning, quite honestly. Sorry.
Right, in which case, thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you.
And then if we sort of housekeeping in favour.
Again, you get 3 minutes and immediate for a couple of seconds.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Is that on? Yeah, perfect. Good evening, Chair and members. Thank you for the time to speak to you tonight. My name is Ben Smith. I'm the Planning Technical Director for Tillier Homes. Obviously, you are aware, but it's worth mentioning that the core strategy just showed 500 houses to the south of Alkington, of which there's also 2 outline planning permissions, 1 unlimited numbers, 1 for 234 plots, 206 have been covered by the reserve maps for the adjacent development, leaving 294. As you know, we're submitting the scheme for 182 plots. It's been mentioned, but again, I'd like to raise it. There is a need in Exeter City and the surrounding area for 1 and 2 bed houses. We're aware of that, and not just affordable housing, but affordable by design. I don't mean small houses, but obviously 1 and 2 bed housing again. And that's also mentioned within the September report that came out at the end of last year. From our point of view, the schemes to the south, which I appreciate aren't in Exeter, but to the south and to the east are larger properties. It's been mentioned previously. We're looking to put a scheme in for 1, 2 and 4 bed properties to make the most use of the land. The result of that is that over and above 116 units, we're able to provide a further 19 affordable properties up to 54, 2 of which will be for and wheelchair accessible. The lower number would only be 1 of those units. At the same time, we're looking to provide 4 million or circa £4 million in 106 contributions in sale. The breakdowns are obviously within the report, which you've seen. But again, over and above 116 plots, through making the best use of the scheme, we're able to provide a circa £750,000 more in contributions, which I think is a point to make. Design was mentioned a minute ago, and as you've seen by the slides earlier, albeit the framework plan and the design access statement aren't approved, we're aware that they did support the outline plan permission. So again, where possible, we have looked to follow the structure of the road, where the massing of the units were, the POS, the green infrastructure. Also, there's been concerns raised about the green infrastructure. We've tried to keep as much of the hedgerow as possible. We will have to submit dormouse licenses to gain permission to remove certain sections. Again, the section 278 access and the footpath, there is a crossing to the northwest corner of the development. And materials was mentioned earlier as well, and I know that came up from the urban designer. So we have spent quite a bit of time looking at what Alphington materials are. They're quite clearly majority of red brick, there's render, there's arched heads, which seems to be throughout Alphington on the historic buildings, but also the more recent developments. Again, that's exactly what we try to follow. So there is a difference in material through the main structure of the site and the sort of secondary areas, but we have looked to utilise materials to match the surrounding area. Appreciate I haven't got too much time, so I think I just want to sort of mention the pertinent point. So, like we said, the land is allocated for planning permission, as we know through the allocation. Couple of minutes. I'll go through the permits. I think that the big point here is it is providing a further 19 affordable houses over and above a smaller scheme or lesser density scheme, and it is providing £750,000 in additional contributions towards the local area, not to mention the additional sill. Thank you for your time.
Right, so any questions? Councillor Matson?
Oh, sorry, lost it. Yeah, could you would you support the request for doing a road crossing?
There is a road crossing as part of section 278, so there's sort of it's hard to point up to that. So to the sort of top, the top left-hand corner, as part of the section 278 works, which is part of the detailed planning permission for the access. Yeah, up there is a crossing point. So which again Ben will be able to confirm, but obviously the access has got a detailed application already, or detailed element already approved. So the section 278 application has been submitted to Devon County Council Highways in line with that, the access and the crossing, which I say Ben hopefully confirms.
Should also be remembered that we've already agreed access arrangements.
Yeah.
Okay, and Councillor Moore.
Sorry.
Thank you. Just wanted to know about your activities in relation to reducing carbon emissions from the development, and particularly meeting the council's requirement to be net zero by 2030. What fabric approach, what technologies are you using, and are we be compliant to the building regulations as updated in Part L to 2023? Because one of your documents said it was 2013 that you were referencing, but obviously that's what 2010 was the baseline. So what standard are you working to, and will they be net zero?
They won't be net zero, but we are going to be building to the new building regs. So, like I say, the regulations that came in June last year that have to be implemented by the middle of June this year. We could go down the masonry version of the construction, which might be an option, but we are looking at timber frame, which again is better for the environment. From the side of things, it is more sustainable. So that I won't go into the details of the structure, but essentially timber frame. It'll be new building regs. There's likely to be PV on most, if not all, the properties. There's other items again, which you've got short shower save systems, which will be part of the build as well, which again saves energy. And without going into the technical details, but essentially yes, they will. We won't be net zero, but we will be building to the current building regs and utilising as many sustainable materials as we possibly can.
Yes, if it's quick. Thank you. I just wanted to follow up on this question about the boundary trees and ecology in relation to bats and all the rest of it. You've mentioned about the dormice, but what are you going to do to improve biodiversity on the site?
So I suppose there's a couple of points to it. So, like I say, the dormice have already been taken into consideration. Like I say, the hedgerow through the centre of the scheme, the framework plan actually looked to remove more of it than we've removed through the POS. At one point, the framework plan showed it all one area. So we've looked to minimise the amount of hedgerow we've removed for the bats. That will be a dark corridor as well, both through the centre of the scheme and to the south of the scheme, which is part of the reason why we were asked to move along the side of the south where you've got the road there. The whole point of that is it's meant to be a dark corridor as well along Markham Lane. The eastern boundary, those trees, they don't form part of the legal boundary of the properties. So apart from the last few to the north, which will be a sort of, it won't be a solid fence, but allow the fence to be in place, hedgerow to go through, but not to be removed, so the residents can't remove it. Along the eastern side of things, of the boundary as well, that's got a 2-metre offset, so that won't even fall within the residence boundary. There's purposely something from an ecology point of view. And then obviously we've got to do further landscaping improvements through the scheme as well.
I have a couple of questions. You might have just addressed one, but I wanted to ask about in one of the consultations that came back. There was a suggestion to put in a green space corridor. Is that the same thing as the lighting strategy that you just mentioned?
That's it, yes. So that, again, working with the county ecologists and our ecologists, that's exactly what we've put. So it's actually, if you sort of had the east side of that hedge, there's a 5-metre buffer where no housing can be put into that buffer. For that, there's no lighting, there's no windows on that side of things. And the southeast corner, there's a building there again, which has got a blank gable, which from an urban design wasn't great, but from ecology, that's exactly what we were asked to do.
And thank you. And also, would you be open to providing some provision for cyclists and cycle storage?
Every property will come with a cycle store. So, albeit it's an indicative position for every rear garden, you see, appreciate you can't probably see out there, but it does come with a cycle store. And also, we have the links as well through the development.
Thank you. And then Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you. Could you outline to us what consultation you have undertaken with the local community to understand their point of view and the issues they've raised this evening?
Yes, it's something that we've done for a few years. To be fair, since COVID, we don't or haven't directly gone and met people. We put websites up. So basically, the link goes out. We have also met 2 or 3 of the local residents that live on the northern boundary, discussed the scheme. Appreciate we didn't gain their support quite clearly, but we have discussed it. We've passed plans on. I think there's a couple of open days or one sort of open day where we provided all the plans, an explanation of what we're doing, why we're doing it. And like I say, there was a website link that was put out for everybody to look at the plans, which we updated when we resubmitted plans to explain what we've done to move forward with the scheme. Appreciate we can't answer all the queries, and this is just as what we've done recently.
Did you have formal discussions with the community forum?
We didn't directly meet face to face with the whole forum. There's quite clearly, when we've gone through the objections, a lot of the objections are either trying to think the best ways, but density is something we'd never be able to resolve. There's density versus mass discussion, which is again it's a planning matter. But a lot of the objections we tried to resolve by explaining it through, rightly or wrongly, the website, which explains how we've come about our scheme.
Thank you very much for your time. Right, then we're going to move formally into debate. Are there any questions for the officers before we begin? Then I'd like to move the recommendation, which is to. Have you got a question? Okay, then.
Thank you very much. To the officers, was our remit 35 points per hectare, or have we changed that?
So the Alphington design brief set out a minimum of 30 dwellings per hectare. So it said a level lower than that would not be accepted. There was no maximum level set out in it. It is worth noting that the page before the bit that's set out on in it makes reference to dwellings in the surrounding area, which does make reference to Tower Walk and Lichgate Road, which is to the east, which has a density of 54 dwellings per hectare, and that is existing dwellings in the surrounding Alphington area.
Councillor Moore.
Thank you. Just a question. Yeah. This issue of character has come up quite a few times, and I think you had a little slide that you didn't talk to, perhaps. I just wondered if you could show us the slide and if you could comment upon the designs and how it's in keeping with the character of the village, please.
So these are, we've got some street scenes. The yellow highlighted bit in the bottom right corner shows you what you're looking at with it. So that's the side views of it, and then the top view there is the main street going through. So we've worked very closely with the council's urban designer on this. Their work here is about making sure that materials reference the surrounding vernacular, and the applicants have actually gone out and produced a document setting out what is in the surrounding area. And I think it's quite a mix of material types and age of dwellings. Following that, it is considered that the red brick is in keeping with the surrounding area, and there is a lot of rendering in property around there, and it is an appropriate design for these dwellings.
Okay, in which case we'll go to the open debate. I'd like to move the recommendation, which is in favour of the application. Anybody like to second? Thank you, Councillor Sutton. And away you go. Councillor Hannaford.
Thank you, Chair. You've moved the recommendation. I was, and I don't know how you would do this or not, I would be happy to remove refusal of this application. I think this application presents itself almost as a broken promise to Alphington because of the changes in the density to this development. I think this feels like a city centre development, which in a suburban area. If you look at if we go back on the previous slide where you saw the neighbouring properties and the size of their gardens to the gardens that you've got here, they are considerably smaller. I'm also concerned as well that we are knowingly putting this application through when the garden spaces don't actually meet our own criteria in some instances, which I think is a concern. And one of the concerns I have also in regard to approving this application is the precedent it might set for the rest of the Alphington development, and also what we have coming down the road in Exeter, that we now have a very dense city centre style development in a rural and suburban area. I'm also uncomfortable that most, if not all, not quite all, the social housing is in the flats as well. I think it's not a good development. All the flats are social housing with a few more houses mixed in. And I don't think it's a good design, a good concept, that we go back to the bad old days where the social housing sort of squirreled away in a dark corner and you know, we have to do it, but we don't really want to do it. And we'll put it there where in a corner somewhere. So I don't like that either with it in terms of it. I think, you know, the sheer density of it compared to what it was before, it is concerning. And then if we look at the street scenes, I think again, which we came up last here as well in terms of the design and the concept. My respect to my esteemed colleague here, I mean, that is more of a city centre street scene, the tightly dense, packed in houses, terraces, which we would see in St Thomas, for example, which you would see in other parts of the city. But is that what we want the whole of the Alphington Southwest extension to be? And then, of course, with that density of housing, then comes the concerns around all of the infrastructure, and we know in St Thomas that the congestion, the pollution, the shortage of medical facilities, the shortage of school facilities affects us as well directly. And I think I think for me, it's overdevelopment, and it's setting a dangerous precedent for the other urban extensions we've got around the city. And I think we should vote to refuse this application.
Okay, procedurally, just for the benefit of everybody else, I have moved the recommendation. If there is a choice not to approve the recommendation, which there could be, and I may not vote and in any way, I've just moved the recommendation. But if that falls, then we move to the next recommendation. Okay, so it's not that you can't refuse it, it's just you have to work through this process first. Okay, Councillor Lights.
And I don't know if it's too late to answer this, but can I get a clarification on the garden situation?
I don't have it all written down in front of me here, unfortunately. There are some that do not meet the recommended levels, but it's a SP, it's a guidance document, so there are examples where it may not be met. In this instance, it was considered that the overall benefits of the scheme outweighed the impacts of that, and it wouldn't be strong enough reason for refusal on those grounds.
Councillor Moore.
Thank you. I just wanted to comment because I just feel quite uncomfortable about the comments from the urban design officer from the council who wrote a report which highlighted the number of gardens which didn't meet the minimum, and there's lots of them. There was a lot of them, but there's a number of really concerning urban design, ecological, and transport issues within the site, include particularly around walking and cycling, that really concern me, that I don't feel have been addressed, and I don't feel that this is consistent with the Alphington development brief, because a lot of time and effort went into that. I was involved in that at the time, and I feel that this is what we see down the hill next to Lidl's, which is more the an urban setting, and it doesn't reflect what goes up the hill in terms of Alphington. So I don't feel I can support this.
Yes, thank you. This, because we've already given outline permission, or we gave the permission for about 116, was it? So,
just there was no level of housing approved outline. It was just for residential development.
We did have a number of about 116. That was what I was asking.
A number was mentioned, but nothing was formally agreed.
Don't worry, I'm not trying to trap you. I'm just saying it was about 116. So this seems to me that listening to the discussion, the issue is really about the number. That's what we're saying.
Yes.
So that's really what I want to hear about. If the committee were minded to say, look, this is far too many, because if it was reduced by somewhat, that would allow for the garden sizes and would allow for some of these things and sort of make it a little bit more in line with what we would expect on an outlying sort of development. Where would we be if we were to, it's more of a question to the officers and legal, if we were minded to do something like that, what position would we find ourselves in?
So, as far as I'm aware, in theory, you could defer it for further discussions about a reduction in the number of dwellings on site. However, that would require significant outlay from the applicant, because it wouldn't just be a site plan being redesigned. It would be almost the entire scheme. All of the plans would need updating. We'd have to reconsider the biodiversity, how everything's laid out. So it's not a small undertaking to ask for that type of thing, unless in this type of development. I don't think that's anyone.
So Councillor Byard asked a really good question, which is really where would we stand at appeal? And I have to say that listening to all of the debate tonight, the essential question really isn't the question that's before you. It's that a lot of the discussion has been about the principle of the development, which has already been acted. This has got planning permission already. The issue about density is a relevant consideration, though, and it's what is it about the density that you're concerned about? Again, a lot of discussion has been referenced to surrounding areas, to the Alphington design brief, and as we've already heard, that talks about 30 dph as a minimum. It is not a target to achieve. It's saying we don't want to go below that line, and if a developer comes forward with a higher density, that is perfectly fine as long as you're happy that they've addressed all the detailed considerations. So it's not arbitrary decisions around densities. What is it that's harmful that you've found in that design that you would want us to then to consider as reasons? So it's a really important point. We're not here to consider the principle or even levels of density. It's the harm to do with the design and the layout that need to be considered. If that's your approach to this, and I would say that on balance, that would be a scheme of this nature in this location. In my experience, 45 dph is not a high number. It's certainly not an urban form of density. You'd add a 1 to that to start with. So we're talking about, if it's an urban location, you're talking about over 100 has been a normal level of density. This is not an urban density. It's not a density that is unusual for this form of development in an out of town edge of settlement location.
I'll bring you back in a minute, Councillor Moore. I just want to see if anyone else, because you've spoken already, anyone else wants to speak, and then I'll bring you back. Councillor Mitchell, then I'll let Councillor Sutton in, please.
Just following on from Councillor Violet's point, it seems that when you have an initial application, we get a suggested number, a suggested outline that we believe is the position that, not that we're agreeing in detail, but we're agreeing to the outline of the principle of the development. And nobody here is declining the principle of development. And we're then told that all matters are reserved and will come back to committee. We're now at the committee and we're partly told, well, it's too late. So I'm yet to see an application where the numbers have actually gone down between one and the other.
We had one in Alphington, actually. And what I was going to say is that there is an option. Your option is to refuse because you don't think on those reasons that Ian gave you. Do you know, you make it sound like it's a fait accompli. It's not. We can approve or we can refuse. What we don't do is approve, negotiate applications by committee. That's the planning officer's job.
Councillor Sutton.
Thank you. I think we're in danger of getting into the territory of discussing the application we wish we had in front of us instead of the one we've actually got in front of us. And our legal responsibility is to make a decision on the basis of what the applicant actually says. And as the chair has already explained, outline consent has been given. The principle of housing development on this site has been agreed by this committee. So it seems to me that we may or may not like what is in front of us, but unless we can actually come up with clear planning reasons to actually turn this application down, we have to go forward and actually approve it. And as I say, my view is that we are in danger of actually saying, I don't want to agree to this one because I would rather it was, it had 27 bungalows on it. Nobody's applied to put 27 bungalows on it, so that's not what is under discussion. Sadly, for the people who actually live in the surrounding area, and I do sympathise with them, because the developments on the Teambridge side of the border are vast, and I have no control and no over what is there, and neither do the residents of Alphington. The border has to be somewhere, and that's where the border is. And Alphington isn't a small village on the edge of Exeter any longer. It is a busy suburb whose residents live and work and study in the city, and there are an enormous number of them who need somewhere to live and would welcome living in one of these developments. And it may not be to everybody's taste, but people will live in these houses, and they are people who potentially are in private rented accommodation in our city at the moment and need somewhere decent to live, and the size of their garden may not be the uppermost on their list of criteria when they're looking for somewhere for their families to live.
Councillor Moore. Thank you. I think the issue around density has become a proxy for the other issues, because I don't actually have a problem with higher densities in general. But the thing that struck me about reading this was as I said, the Urban Designers Report, and their conclusion was the reserve matters application is not satisfactory as submitted. It exhibits poor design, is not supported in its current form. And the issues that we've talked about, the impact on the ecology, the following the development brief, the comments around in the report about walking and cycling and how that's going to happen around the estate, because you've got there's going to be onslaughts of reversing cars, and the design and the amenity, or particularly of gardens. So there's all these issues that are in this report, which I think are quite significant, which I think need to be seriously addressed for this site.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. So here's what I've listened to. First of all, I remember the other application where the numbers went down in Alphington because higher density applications pay towards our 5-year land supply, which means we're less likely to have to build on those green spaces like we've discussed in the past. So actually, I have a planning background from a long time ago where 30 per hectare was the minimum that you could possibly do, and it encouraged a higher density so that we could protect more greenfield land. So density for me is not something that I find as concerning. I think, yes, there are areas of Alphington around there that are much larger and they have much bigger gardens, and that's very nice, but that's not what everybody wants anymore. And actually, as someone who lives in a semi-detached with a very large garden, I'd like to share it with anyone who'd like to use it as an allotment, because I can't look after it on my own with 2 kids and 2 jobs. So, you know, that there's a balance there that I think we need to understand. Much earlier on, there was argument made about how we were going to lose out on the amount of money towards education and GP facilities and everything. But actually, if you read through that, that's done per dwelling. So if the density increases, more money goes towards. So that's not a consideration. I think we just need to clear that up a little bit. It doesn't mean that the schools are nearby or the GPs are nearby, but they are getting the amount, or the NHS are. They're getting the money per dwelling rather than per, you know, based on the original outline planning application. It was worded in a way that the one about the district heating facilities was probably not written as well. This one is adaptable to any changes that might happen within it, and that's probably something we need to bear in mind in the future, because I know there have been times before where that's happened as well. As for design, I'm constantly nagged here about how it's all imbues in the eye of the beholder. I think an effort to fit in is there. I also would like to say that I know so many people who live in Victorian dwelling housings that they paid an absolute fortune for, because they really like the idea of that style of housing, and it's one of the highest density housing. And I imagine that really high number you're dealing with nearby probably is Victorian terraced houses. So it is very relative, and we do have to take into account everything you said, everything that has been pointed out by the urban design officer. And then we need to take that information and we need to weigh the information, because that's how material considerations and policies have to be balanced. And in this situation, I do have some concerns about design, but not enough to outweigh the need for housing on that site and the need to make the best use of land that we possibly can when we are developing, to stop other fields. And I can't account for what happens in Teambridge, but I imagine they're facing similar problems. I just wish they wouldn't do it on the edge of our city all the time and then not give us anything else to go with it. So I will be voting in favour of this application, but I don't think for anyone it's an easy. Any of the applications on the sides of cities have been easy, because they have changed, and it's happened in Pinot. It's changed, which the side of the city I live on, it's changed the appearance of those areas, but we have to accept those areas appearances have changed as gradually through time, and they will continue to evolve. So I am going to take the original recommendation to the vote. I've explained what will happen if that doesn't pass, and then we'll move on from there. But all those in favour, could you please raise your hands?
7 are in favour.
All those against?
5 are against.
And there are no abstentions. Okay, we're going to have a brief break for everybody, I imagine, to get a drink and for the people from Alphington, unless you want to stay, I imagine you might want to leave the room.
Right, thank you. Now we'll move on to planning application number 221177, land adjacent to Grail Lawn and Flemingway.
Hello again, Chair. So this is an application for 2 dwellings in that area in red at the north of the screen. It's in land adjacent to Grail Lawn and Flemingway. So it's a windfall site that's currently vacant. I'll just find the right bit there. It's currently fenced off and not publicly accessible, and it doesn't form part of an existing garden with it. It's bordered by a public footpath on one side, which leads to a communal garden. So that's the area on the left that leads past the houses. And then on the right, it's got a pedestrian and cycle route running alongside it. I appreciate it does look like a very narrow site. So it's proposed to create two-story adjoined one-bedroom dwellings. Whilst it is on a narrow site, the dwellings do exceed the nationally described space standards, and each has a private garden area. I think that they, as far as I'm aware, they do meet the garden requirements as well. In terms of, so each will have, where am I? Sorry, this is a new application to me today. All habitable rooms are served by windows, and there will be a good level of amenity to occupants. In terms of neighbour amenity, the buildings have been designed with narrower windows on the front and rear elevations to reduce intervisibility with the neighbouring properties. This is further assisted by the positioning of the site and the design of the surrounding area. So you can see at the top there, you've got where it says garden in the green area, that's a high boundary wall. And then to the south, you've also got boundary walls and parking and garage areas. Access to the site is from the foot and cycle way running along the south side. The doors come out onto the footpath part of it, not the cycle part of it. So that's a bonus, really. In terms of the first floor windows and overlooking, it's proposed to require all of the first floor windows on the north and south elevation to be obscure glazed, and the permitted development rights for additional windows will be removed. The design of this building is to take advantage of this windfall site, creating the massing in the centre whilst leaving open space on either side of it. It is designed to be lower than the surrounding built form, and it doesn't seek to mimic them. It's proposed to use vertical timber cladding to complement the surrounding trees and differentiate the design from the established dwellings in the immediate area, helping to mitigate for this addition to the street scene. So the main windows for it are on the east and west elevations for each dwelling, facing towards their gardens rather than towards any other dwellings. There are these small windows on it and rainwater goods, which add visual interest to the buildings, and there is a condition that final details of these will be required to ensure they are of a suitable design quality. The development is car-free, and there is secure cycle storage for each property. The surrounding area is subject to permit parking, and the highway authority would then decide on whether permits would be issued to this property or not. In conclusion, the proposal is considered to make a modest contribution to the housing supply in the city through this windfall site. One-bedroom dwellings are underprovided in this area, and this will help to work towards that shortfall. The design is considered suitable for such a unique position, and it provides suitable occupant amenity whilst avoiding significant impacts to neighbours. The proposal is therefore recommended to the committee for conditional approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Having attended the site visit for this, I think it would be helpful if the officer could indicate the size of the site in relation to this room, to give us some indication of the depth, which I think is about 2/3 of this room, and the length slightly longer than this half of the room for the whole site.
I wouldn't be able to measure it out there. I think there is a plan stating the measurements on here. Widths on it. Yes, actually, the architect might be able to comment on that in a minute. They will be speaking on it.
And secondly, can you tell us about the status of the hedge at the rear of the property? Because it doesn't show up very well in any of the diagrams you put to us, and I think most of us are very concerned with the traditional Devon hedge that it remained.
Yes, so in the officer report, it sets out that the proposal seeks to retain and extend the northern hedge and plant new hedgerow on the east and west boundaries and much of the southern boundary as well. And there are also 5 trees proposed.
Thank you, Chair. Can we clarify if this is actually in a conservation area? Because, I mean, the design of this, I'm just so shocked. It looks like an old shipping container. It's appalling. I mean, it really is. I mean, we can go into all the space and the dimensions later and all the rest of it, but I mean, the design of it is terrible.
So
Can we listen to the officer, please?
it's not in a conservation area, and it was considered by the assessing officer that the design was appropriate for this type of development.
And not that it makes any difference, but the officer is not well today, so Chris has stepped in at the last minute, which is why he may be a little bit behind. But thank you very much for doing so. Thank you very much, Councillor Snow.
Having looked at this on a site visit, one of the things that did concern me was there is a hedgerow which runs to the rear of the development, small hedgerow, which I don't think is actually within the bounds of the development, but any development would affect the routes going through there. Has that been addressed by the officers when looking at this matter, please? Protection of the routes.
Bear with me 1 second, I'll just have a check.
We've got all 3 officers, like planning officers, trying to find the answer for you. Sorry, we usually are much better at this. I'm very sorry. It's a last minute thing.
It's my understanding, again, we're a slight difficulty here because the case officer is not here, but that the case officer did raise this with the applicant or the applicant's agent, and was assured that the hedge could be retained and wouldn't be harmed by the development. But it's something you might want to ask the architect when he speaks.
Thank you. Christopher, can we go back to the picture of the front of the property, please? Yeah. Oh, no, go back again. Stay there. Thank you. I know it's opposite Wyvern Barracks, but I've stayed in better billets than that, I have to say. I mean, it's modern design. I appreciate that. It just doesn't do anything to me apart from say it's a square box.
Not a question.
Yeah. The size and matting of it, it's like a Devon longhouse, but without the thatch roof. What time are you going home tonight?
Never at this rate.
Well, that's a question. I don't know. I just can't work out.
There will be a debate in a minute.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'll come back to that one.
Yeah. If you think there was a question, you can answer. Go for it.
Just in terms of material, obviously, sometimes when you see a plan like this, it can look a bit not as great as it may end up like, because it's a drawing of it. Obviously, all of the external materials are conditioned, so that it would have to be of a really good quality to be suitable for this site, and we would expect samples of them before anything is installed to make sure it is, it's the right type, that it weathers correctly, appropriate colour and all of that. Thanks.
Okay, that's all the questions I think we've got. We've got someone speaking. Oh no, we've got a councillor speaking under standing order number 44, which is Councillor Vizard in his regular planning spot.
Hello again.
No one's explaining anything to you.
Yes, my regular slot. Hello again. Thanks, everybody. Good evening, members. I'd like to start by thanking those of you who, at short notice, were able to visit the site the week before last.
Local residents and I felt it would be instructive for you to see it in the flesh, as it were. And I know that those who attended were surprised by the narrow dimensions of the strip of land which is subject to this application this evening. 44 public objections, including from the Grah Lawn Residents Association, is a very significant number for an application of this scale and underlines how unpopular it is locally. As you have seen, the site is extremely narrow. It provides important green visual amenity and some biodiversity value as well. And I think, to pick up on Councillor Mitchell's point, I think it is fair to say it is narrower than the width of this room. Further narrowing of the footprint of the proposed buildings, they would be set back a metre from the footpath. This not only further reduces the internal dimensions of the dwellings, it still represents only a minimal distance from pedestrians and cyclists, an inappropriate and unwelcome intrusion onto this important public right-of-way. Along the rear of the piece of land, as has been mentioned already, is a hedgerow, and I am concerned that development of this site would mean damage or loss to this valuable natural heritage. This is in addition to the loss of the green space itself, which the Campaign to Protect Rural England objected to. They also shared residents' concerns about the break in the tree-lined green corridor and the loss of wildlife connectivity and functionality. While I note the content of the ecological assessment report and the mitigation, including recommendations to retain a qualified ecologist to oversee ecological matters if this were to be approved, this does not mitigate the overall loss of the spatial flow and amenity of the design of Grah Lawn and Flemingway. Or, as eloquently and accurately described by the Campaign to Protect Rural England, the strips of linear habitat which radiate throughout the surrounding urban landscape, providing local wildlife and dispersion corridors. Nicely put. Small green spaces are of substantial value to the amenity of the neighbourhood and, as we all know, are beneficial to our mental health and general well-being. The pedestrian and cycle path are also of critical visual and social value, and 2 dwellings built there will be overbearing and detrimental to this amenity. The existing openness and visibility lines of the site already successfully detracts from potential antisocial behaviour, so why close it in and create a claustrophobic corridor or alleyway in its place? I would argue that this is not a good design principle. Neither is it an acceptable trade-off for the sake of 2 one-bedroom properties which, given their location and the rental market, are unlikely to provide a genuinely affordable housing option. If the small natural corridor is built on, I fear for the balance of this well-designed community housing development, which is a highly successful example of town planning. Residents describe the proposals as shoehorning, quite rightly, and it is quite simply an overdevelopment of a tiny, tiny postage stamp site. Residents have been proactive with regard to an alternative for this site. The Grah Lawn Residents Association, as neighbours of the applicant, have offered to work with him to landscape and enhance the area, as it could be of very significant community benefit, including wildlife or pollinator corridors. This was offered at the informal consultation back in September. I wanted to also seek your consideration of internal and external space of these units. While it may not breach technical guidelines, I am concerned that a lack of a 5-year housing supply is being cited, at least partly, to compromise the standard and size of living space this council approves. I have no doubt that the applicant has good intentions when it comes to the environmental aspects of the construction. We also need to consider what homes are actually like to live in. The design of these homes is dictated by the space on this extremely narrow site, and as such, are seriously compromised and feel barely adequate for happy living. I don't doubt they would be let or sold, but quite frankly, in the housing climate we are currently in, virtually any oddly shaped, compact and bijou dwelling in any available space that hits a minimum square meterage would be. That does not mean the council should be approving them. As the Grah Lawn Residents Association have said in their representations to me, Exeter Residential Design Guide, page 23, shows a photo of Grah Lawn and describes it as a strong sense of place created by a formal planned character. The design and materials used in the proposed development are at odds with this local planning policy, as it doesn't fit in with the character of the area. The character and appearance of the area is something we work hard to preserve, they say. We know that design is subjective, but it's already been commented on already. Residents have strongly expressed their view that the proposed dwellings are not in keeping with the surrounding brick-built houses, and their timber-clad appearance would be incongruous as well as ugly. As the officer report has acknowledged, neighbours are very concerned that the proposed development will overlook private gardens to each side with the windows on each end and would allow direct views into neighbouring properties, including bedrooms. This could mean a loss of privacy for neighbours, and while conditions can mitigate this to some degree, it again underlines the unsuitability of this site in the first place. One of the benefits of the site visit was gaining a better sense of the relationship between the sites, the proposed dwellings and the existing homes, and the curvature of the Grah Lawn properties, which are a mixture of flats and houses. Residents feel that the drawings and designs do not adequately express the impact the proposed dwellings would have in terms of proximity and overlooking, overshadowing and loss of light. So I would ask that you consider this very carefully. Finally, I would like to draw members' attention to a planning refusal on this site in 2008, because the reasons given then underline the points residents are making now, so it is extremely pertinent. In 2008, a 1.9 metre close-boarded timber fence was erected around the same area without planning permission. A retrospective application was refused on the grounds that it, and I quote, will set an undesirable precedent for similar visually harmful boundary treatments in the vicinity, and that the siting and constituent materials are intrusive features in the street scene which detract from the character and appearance of the area. A subsequent decision by the planning inspectorate dismissed an appeal and upheld the council's enforcement notice, citing the development plan for the area and the local plan, referring to the policy that new development should maintain and improve the quality of Devon's environment, and that all designs should promote local distinctiveness, contribute to the amenity of the townscape. The inspector stated that there was one main issue in the appeal, namely the impact of this fence on the character and appearance of the surrounding residential area. The inspector went on, Flemingway forms part of a modern housing estate. The appealed site is a wedge-shaped parcel of land sandwiched between two pedestrian routes that link Flemingway and Barrack Road. The fence in question runs alongside a public footpath and cycleway and encloses a small piece of land at the end of a linear green public open space. This residential area is characterised by modern terraced houses and flats with open-fronted private areas. Boundary treatments generally comprise of high-quality brick walls or low hedges, and this whole development has a most pleasing urban quality. The inspector concludes, the fence that has been erected is highly visible both in the street scene and in longer range views down the footpath, and in my opinion, it is seen as a harsh and completely alien feature. It also acts as an intrusive visual barrier. I therefore have no doubt that this structure has seriously harmed the character and appearance of this attractive residential area. I know we're talking about a fence historically, and that's not what's in front of us, but that clear and unequivocal statement by the planning inspector about a mere 1.9 metre timber fence, given that in the light of this previous refusal, please consider the detrimental impact that two double-storey timber-clad houses would have on the same site. Thank you for your time, and if I may, Chair, I'd like to just share, I've only got 3 copies, but I put one that way and 2 the other way. This is the details of the previous planning refusals and appeal documents and some useful photos. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Vizard. Any questions? Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Councillor Moores. Just wanted to pick up on your point, just to clarify, you think that the minimum technical space standards aren't sufficient?
What I was talking about was I did say it meets the guidelines, so it ticks a box, but I'm concerned about very, very small size, both internally and externally, of these units in terms of providing the kind of housing we need that's livable. It goes to people's well-being. That's it's a happy home. So I am concerned about very, very small units like this. Yeah.
Okay. In which case, thank you, Councillor Vizard. Could I bring the objectors, member of the public as an objector forward? That's Caroline Miller. I understand that for some questions you may have to look behind you to get some answers. Okay, thank you very much. You've got 3 minutes. Press the button that looks like someone's shouting, and we'll shout when you run out of time, okay?
Good evening. I represent the Gralawn Residents Association, speaking on behalf of Gralawn and those affected in Flemingway. Thank you if you were able to visit the site and for reading the many objections raised. All showed tremendous opposition from local residents, and it's clear that small spaces matter a lot. I'd like to reiterate these relevant objections and start with this being the overdevelopment of a small site. The proposed dwellings are simply too big in mass and scale for the footprint of the site. Because the site is so small and narrow, the design has a significant overbearing impact. A two-storey, industrial-looking flat roof block with galvanised steel and corrugated zinc features, intrusively shoehorned at the end of a tree-lined avenue, an avenue that has enormous visual amenity. The Exeter planning policy states that development should be sympathetic to the surrounding built environment. The design and materials used are unsympathetic, visually jarring, and really out of character. It would change the appearance of our lovely tree-lined avenue with its open aspect to that of a narrow alley. The narrative in the design and access statement that it makes the public space safer and more enjoyable is untrue, and not an opinion shared by any residents. The dwellings would certainly result in loss of amenity to surrounding properties. In terms of privacy, all the first floor windows either look into the properties at 33 or 68 Flemingway, or they overlook the various bedrooms and outside spaces of 5 Gralawn properties. Those residents feel that obscured glass doesn't help because windows can be opened. In terms of loss of daylight and overshadowing, 33 and 68 Flemingway are particularly affected for several months of the year. The owners of 33 are having their own right to light survey done, as their property is particularly affected in this way. The PV panels will be visually intrusive to the Gralawn properties, and the reverse steel frame of them an eyesore for Flemingway. You'll see in the planning history that the appeal to keep the fence around the boundary failed, and the planning inspector's decision stated that it acted as an intrusive visual barrier. And this structure has seriously harmed the character and appearance of this attractive residential area. So residents are asking why a two-storey structure with alien features can be considered any better. Residents feel that despite a housing shortage, there's no excuse for overdevelopment, no excuse for an unsympathetic design which results from an inadequate footprint or the loss of visual amenity for a great many people. Unfortunately, this is the case here, and we'd be grateful if you could please take this into account. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank
you. If you could please bring forward Nigel Gray, speaking with favour. You'll get 3 minutes. I will give you shouting times out. Okay, please press the button with the shouting.
Can you hear?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a shame that the officers weren't acquainted with the scheme, because some of the wording in the report I'll come to in a minute. I'm Nigel Grange, I'm the architect and the applicant's agent. These are 2 one-bedroom, 2-person houses that were modestly helped to meet Exeter's greatest need for small homes. The design and access statement explains how we've explored design options, consulted early on with both neighbours and council officers. We haven't been deaf, we've actually tried to understand and respond. The proposed design is a positive end result of a thorough and careful and caring process. We actually care about the end result. The space standards are generous, as is the concept. Contrary to the comments, they exceed the national guidelines in terms of internal space. They have, in your own officers' words, amazing views out into their own gardens. We've controlled the amount of views sideways, sort of, if you like, over the 2 adjoining properties, over 2 adjoining estates. The aim is to deliver 2 net zero carbon homes, as assessed under the latest building regs, a fabric first approach with MVHR, mechanical ventilation, heat recovery, source heat pumps, etc. They are unashamedly modern. They're almost like a piece of joinery sitting there at the end of a row of trees. What better material than actually having timber clad in a beautifully detailed way? They don't marry to the existing estate, either side. Both are slightly different. They are something which stands in its own right. The designers of a high standard, yet simple and understated, the small scale defers to the adjacent properties. In their report, council officers advise the distinctive design and high quality finished materials and fine but simplistic exterior detailing would enhance both the site's visual richness, character and appearance and that of the wider area. That's your own officer's opinion, totally contrary to what you've heard, and it hasn't been presented this evening. Many objectors raised objections about the perceived overlooking impact and loss of privacy. We actually we've done modelling showing that in terms of daylight, sunlight, overviewing, etc., we are in full compliance with your own design guide, and where you explain there's a 25-degree law, it's a rule above the midpoint of the ground floor windows, we're way below it. There's talk about rights of light. The house on number 33, the far corner, the left-hand far corner of these buildings is, if you measure daylight, you measure it right angles to the amount of sky you can see through a window. This is at 50 degrees round and only 11 degrees up. It's tiny, by comparison. When they considered all the objections raised, the officers concluded, and I quote, "No significant adverse harm is identified to the residential amenity of the adjacent properties." They also acknowledged that the wildlife, the proposals we're making, will actually add to the green infrastructure and biodiversity value. We're not taking away from it. The hedge is the first 10 metres.
Okay,
Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions? Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you. Just following up the point I raised earlier, the officer, as I say, the officer's not here. Can you just inform us what the depth of the actual building is and the width of each building?
Right, the depth of each building is about 4 metres. The width of each half is about 9 metres. The overall footprint in each one is about 29.5 square metres per floor. So it's up towards 60 square metres for a 2-bedroom house. And the 2-bedroom house has got, a 2-person, 1-bedroom house, and they've got in excess of 45 square metres of garden area each. They far exceed what you get elsewhere in the city as a 1-bedroom, 2-person house. These are amazingly good in terms of, it's unbelievable that that they should be considered to be valued.
Thanks for the sales pitch. Just clarification. In regard, what distance is there at the rear build of these properties to the hedge behind them?
To the hedge behind them, the first 10, if you look at that picture up there, the first 10 metres back from the higher part of the green is the only amount of that which is actually privet or lime. In plan, the dark green is privet and lime. The rest of that is bramble, and it's not a hedge. There's photographs of it from 2014, 15, 16, where it's nothing. And so what we're proposing is to actually help create a hedge there.
So what is the gap between the rear of the property and the hedge line?
It varies, and in some instances it's 1.5 metres, 2 metres, and on the left-hand side, the property boundary is the hedge because it's a lovely hedge. We don't want to take it and get rid of it.
And to reinforce it, you're leaving 1 metre of space at the front of the property.
Thereabouts. Yeah.
So in relation, that's a question I asked earlier of an officer, in relation to this room, how do the dimensions of the property fit into this room?
Can I paste something?
Well,
this room must be 7 metres wide, thereabouts. Yeah. The far end of the property is about 7.5. The narrow west end is about 4.5 metres wide. The overall length is about 37.5 metres long, whereas this is probably about 36 metres long, 35 maybe.
Thank you.
I think the point Councillor Mitchell is trying to make is that unless you have been there, you probably will. It's really difficult to understand the size of the site.
Having visited the site, I can see it in relation to this room as well.
But bring in Councillor Branston now, please.
Thank you, Chair. I can understand why 44 residents are concerned with the impact of loss of privacy, light, and the poor designs and materials. I think this application is not appropriate. Oh, it's oh, sorry.
There we go. No,
Okay.
come back to you in a minute.
You could convert that into a question.
Thank you very much for your time. Oh, no, that's no more. Sorry, I didn't see you.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify the issue around the hedge going on the site visit. So the north side, the top, the hedge is right up to the boundary, and it clearly was a hedge. So how do you intend to protect the hedge during construction and thereafter? You know, in the report it said, you know, it's a sort of a route for hedgehogs and that sort of thing. And so the ecology is really important to this.
Yeah, agree.
And the other thing is, can you just comment on the materials used, please? Because I think this projection here is very, it's very sort of computer looking like. It doesn't look like a, what is it? It's not like a photograph. I think that's what I'm trying to say. Can you describe the photographs? But can you describe what it will look like in a little bit more detail?
Yeah, the design access statement contains lots of 3D images of it. Well, first of all, with regard to what it looks like, it'll be vertical boarding in larch heartwood or you know, or similar. So it'll be a long life material. You don't need to stain or preserve or whatever. The detailing will be such that it'll throw the water off, so it'll age gracefully. It'll actually, as you're looking towards it, as it grows silver, you know, sort of over through age, you're looking down the avenue of trees, you know, towards it, and it kind of reflects the bark and everything of those trees. The windows are specifically, it's quite quirky in its north and south elevations in terms of windows, but with very generous windows looking east and west. And so it will appear much more like a well-crafted, you know, yes, it is a box, and it's quite honestly a box, but it'll be a very low carbon box, and it'll actually be something which you know will be beautiful. But the hedge will be, or the brambles will be kind of cleared on the site, obviously, because we would have to do that in order to carry out the work. The hedge on the dark part on the western side, left of the drawing, will have terrace fencing, etc., erected in front of it and protected. The excavation is minimised by using bore piling, and also by having a ground beam around it. So with all the big trees and everything, and the changes in groundwater, there's no need to actually dig deep foundations. So everything will be done to actually make it the groundworks happen, and then prefabricated off-site, so brought in, craned in, and actually put together. So it can be done. It's perfectly feasible, and that is also a very green way of doing it. It's much sort of lower in carbon. It's much less building waste. It's much quicker on site, and it's a direction everyone is travelling in.
You may have answered the question. I just wanted to clarify. So you're saying that the choice of the design and the materials are to do with it being a net zero home specifically?
The design and the materials are in part about being a net zero home, in part, and in part about actually having a lovely, two lovely little houses to live in, and in part actually responding to the fact, yes, it was the head of a driveway. It was originally the avenue of trees with a driveway that went up to the groundsman's cottage, and it's on that line, and it's kind of, the whole thing is kind of reflecting that, and and also about adding observation, because there are areas where cars have got no front doors and windows looking out over them, where pedestrians, etc., have got no front doors and windows, and the police, when they looked at it, unfortunately it's less than 10 houses, but when they looked at it, they actually made a comment that it would vastly improve observation.
Thank you very much. I think we've run out of questions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Right. So before we head into debate, are there any questions for officers? No? Right. Then I'm going to move the recommendation as it stands procedurally. Councillor Hannaford. Can we debate the recommendation, please? Oh, someone second, yeah. Anyone second. Don't mind. Councillor Sutton again. We'll make it easy. Anybody who wishes to speak? Councillor Branston.
Thank you, Thank you, Chair. I can understand why 44 residents are concerned with the impact and the loss of privacy, and most importantly, light, poor designs, materials. This application is just not appropriate in this neighbourhood. And I think that the presentation from Councillor Vizard and Caroline Miller, I thought both of them were first class. They were compelling what they raised. I won't go all over it again. It was already spoken very, very well, and I will vote against this application. Thank
you.
Yeah, thank you. I felt some of the questioning was quite helpful from the applicant that was being done, and it was being drawn out. But I just feel it may be the right building in the wrong place at the wrong time, and I don't feel I want to be guilt tripped because it is, all the carbon neutral stuff and everything else. I don't feel I want to be guilt tripped into saying, well, yeah, all that, oh, great. Can I say this? It's, I suppose we all got a vision of what we think or expect to see. I wonder what it would have looked like if there was about 30 of these on the last site we were talking about. I'm not sure what would have happened. So my position is I am opposing it, and I'll vote against it, and we'll look for the reasons at the end, Chair.
So, not that many of you are speaking, but I get the feeling that people are not really enjoying this application. So we probably need to, there are some things that we do need to probably accept about the site, is that we are meeting the requirements that are necessary for the size of the building for one bedroom houses. There is a need for one bedroom houses in the area, and that the overlooking is not deemed through our policies to be an issue. What I think I can hear from the room is that we really don't like this design, which is a genuine reason to refuse an application. So I'm going to go ahead with the procedure, ask people to vote for the recommendation, which is in favour, and we'll see where we go from that point forward, okay? All those in favour of the application, please?
All in favour, Chair.
All those against?
12.
And no abstentions. I don't think this is one that we need to defer for why we were objecting to it. I don't think it's a great debate. I think from what I've heard from what's been said, but I'm willing to listen to anybody else if you want to bring something in, but it would appear that the reason for deferral, or for the reason for refusal, is the design of the buildings in the setting they're currently sat in, because we should also bear in mind it is brownfield site because the site's been used before as a driveway. I was going to, unless you've got something else, I was going to ask the officers to perhaps suggest some wording on that.
Well, I was going to say some of what Councillor Vizard mentioned with previous applications and the stuff he sent round, we could rely on some of that in our reasoning. That's all I was going to add, because I think that was very helpful.
By using the wording you're suggesting, are we conceding the principle of development on the site?
Yes. Yes, we would be. What we probably need to assess is whether the other position is defendable and appeal.
What about that information that Councillor Vizard gave us with regard to the last? Does that help us at all? Is what I'm saying.
The fence. Yeah. So I think it would be quite difficult, I think, to come up with a reasonable reason for refusal on the principle. There's nothing in planning law that you cannot build on a piece of land as long as it's appropriately designed, meets all of the considerations. So that I can't think of a policy that we've got that you could attach a reason for refusal for on the principle. It is, as I think you put it really well, Councillor Bailey, perhaps listening to the conversations here is the wrong building, in the wrong place. But the actual
place, the opportunity to build a home or a couple of homes on that site, you know, in principle, I can't think of a policy reason for refusing it on that ground.
Councillor Hannaford.
So just following on from that, Chair, I mean, and again, I'm just putting this out there, in terms of the previous appeal, the development is contrary to policy CO6 of the Devon Structure Plan 2001 to 2016, and policies DG1 and DG4 of the Exeter Local Plan 95 to 11 for the following reasons. Now, obviously those are dated and those are time limited, but are you saying that now things have changed so radically that those core principles and policies could not apply to this site?
So my understanding of that appeal decision was it's about the impact that that fence had on the character and appearance of the area. I don't believe that decision was about the principle of building a fence there. In any event, we're talking about a home, not a fence. So you've got to be really clear. If you want to refuse this because it's in principle building to provide homes, you've got to have a really good understanding and reasons for that. So are you saying that in principle you do not consider use of this land as a home? Then that would be a very difficult decision to defend.
If you think about normal planning applications, we have to weigh the different options, Jess. So with just the fencing off of the land, there was no benefit to anyone. So now what we have to consider is whether there is a benefit that would outweigh the harm, and that's your decision to make. But I think it's important we understand that before we make any reason for it. I think we're refusing it anyway. I mean, but that's one of the reasons for refusing.
So it's really clear from the debate that there's a very strong concern about the detailed design, and if you want to allow us a couple of minutes, we'll just confer as officer. We'll come back with a bit of wording. So the alternative is that you want to allow us to take more time over reasons and explore those reasons a bit further. I would prefer that you give us a clear area of concern or concerns, plural. But my duty then is to advise you how defendable those areas of concerns are. From what I've heard in the conversation, really clear area of concern around detailed design, which is eminently defendable should we be in an appeal situation and we have policies that you could attach that reason to. In terms of the principle of building a home on that site, I would advise you in the opposite way, that it's very difficult to defend. Can't think of a policy that we could attach to that reason that's currently in an adopted local plan. Because I think if you did that, you've got to think as well, are we ruling out development on any bit of land? You know, and it's just got to be really clear about that. As a principle, it would be a very important principle, you know, and be so mindful of that, really.
Okay, so goodbye, Councillor Barrett, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I fully understand what Ian is saying, and I do get that. We don't want to have a stick that we could end up beating ourselves with. But I would say there's lots of small bits like that all over the city that we would say, we don't really want that. It's not appropriate. I mean, that's really what I get what you're saying, but really, I mean, do you understand what I mean? That's what I'm struggling with. And no, I can't at the moment say that I'm for the principle of something being there. I'm not. Sorry, but
in that case, I think then what we need to do is articulate what concerns you, the committee, about building a home on that plot, so that, and that'll give us a clue as to how to draft that reason. So what is it that concern? What harm is it causing you in building on that piece, other than the detailed design, which we're really clear about? Yeah. What harm is it resulting?
Can I bring in Councillor Sutton?
Are we in the territory of overdevelopment?
I think, yeah.
So I think again, I mean, in this context, you'd have to take into consideration a number of factors. If you consider it to be older, one would be space standards, you know, and we've clearly seen there that this is quite generous in terms of space internally and in terms of garden space. So that would be difficult. There may be other factors like loss of hedges, loss of other factors that exist on the site. But again, it seems to me that if anything, this is going to be adding to that by improving that. So overdevelopment, again, feels to me a difficult one. That is more understandable if you feel as though 2 homes is, you consider that to be over, that's something we could kind of develop into a reason. Again,
Councillor Hanford.
Thank you. I do think this is overdevelopment. I think you alluded to Harry Potter earlier on, didn't you, on something else? And to me, this feels like that railway station. Where is it? Something 86B, where you can go through the. Yeah, that's right. So it's like you look at this site and you think, well, yeah. I mean, what's there now is basically what should be there, which is the bridleway, the walkway, and everything else. And we could then go around all of Exeter with a Harry Potter wand and start seeing pepper potting things in the middle of the road or on top of something else. And it's just too much. And this is too much, and it's not appropriate. I mean, the design, with all due respect to those who've designed it, and beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but I still think it's a shockingly bad design. I made a note of one of the things that was said about controlled views, and I think sometimes when we're on a planning committee, we need to be honest where things haven't gone well. And from my experience, for those of you who are on the council with county ground development, we put in so-called controlled views along Tin Lane so that other houses weren't being overlooked. I now think, looking at it and having to go in those homes sometimes, that they've got substandard homes because they really, all of us should have been bold and just put proper windows in, because they basically got no windows on one side of the house and it doesn't work. So again, I wasn't going into that much detail because I thought, well, you know, it's pretty obvious, I think. But again, almost as small windows as they are, and I get the big windows at the end of either of the properties, but we've got really small properties in some parts of St Thomas. You know, some of the older parts in Sydney Road, we've got some really tiny, narrow houses that have been there for hundreds of years. We've got Pince's Cottages, for example, which are really tiny, but they benefit with massive bay windows, even though it's probably, you know, really small. But I just think the design is poor, the location's not right. If this isn't overdevelopment, I don't know what is, quite frankly. And I think I understand what you're saying from a legal point of view. You don't want us to open to appeal. You want to give us a robust position. But I think any reasonable person looking at these photographs or whatever would say, no, we can't. This is just not on. Quite frankly, it's too much. And I think it's about, you might say, well, that will hold you up in the appeal in Bristol, Councillor Hannaford. It may or may not. But I think sometimes, Chair, I think you've had a clear, unanimous view here today. You've had some very eloquent speeches from the local councils. I get the passion of the architect, and it's his design and his project, and we must respect that because he's, it's his concept and everything. I get that, but on balance, strongly on balance, it needs to be a refusal. I think we need to get some words sorted out and then move on to the next item.
If everybody would like to take 5 minutes to go and have a wander, then we'll come back with reasons for refusing. Okay, Councillor Newby, the officers have had a think, and the timescales that we have at the moment that they're working with are not going to be good enough to come up with a robust reason for refusal. So I'm going to propose that we defer to bring the reasons for the refusal back to the meeting as we previously have done before, so that the wording will be stronger and more robust. Would someone like to second that recommendation? And all those in favour, please. All those against? And were there any abstentions? Thank you. Thanks very much. Okay, and then we'll move on to the final committee, well, not committee item, the substantive. Thank you. There's a word in there I can think of, which is planning application 211014 full, which is for the demolition of a garage at Maxim Motors and construction of 3-storey basement. This is the reasons for refusal for the application. That's what the conversation is we're here to have, unless somebody tells me otherwise, okay? You will need to declare an interest, Councillor Mitchell. And Councillor Mitchell, you are reserving your right to speak as a local member of the public. Yes, thank you. Right, is this you, Roger? Oh, we're letting Chris have this one off, are we?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this application, as members will recall, was deferred at an earlier meeting as members voted to defer it to explore reasons for refusal. And so we've taken away your wishes and we've come up with a reason for refusal, which I hope you will be satisfied with as the best chance of defending this application should it go to appeal. And the reason we've come up with, which is in your report, is the use of the site for student housing would not be appropriate within the St James ward, as it would lead to a further concentration of this use in this particular area of the city, resulting in an increased imbalance of population within the local community, contrary to policy H5B of the Exeter Local Plan First Review 1995 to 2011, and the overarching aims of the Exeter St James Neighbourhood Plan. So, as a reminder, the application was recommended for approval by officers, but members wished to refuse it. That is the reason for refusal wording that we are saying to you would be our best chance of defending this on appeal.
Chair, that's acceptable to everybody. Can we move to the vote on that?
We
or
can't, because we've got 3 public speakers, or
Okay.
2 public speakers,
All right.
and we have to listen to their point of
They don't talk me out of it.
I know. Well, I have to say I did query this earlier, but this is the procedure and we are following it. Okay. In which case, councillor speaking under standing order number 44, Councillor Pearce. Sorry, Councillor Moore, you may ask the question.
Thank you. Thank you very much for drafting that, which I broadly agree with. I just want a clarification on there. There was a policy within the neighbourhood plan, I think it was C2, and I just wondered why that didn't apply.
I've got a copy of the plan with me, but I couldn't find any policies in the neighbourhood plan that directly related to this proposal, and we did go through this at the committee last time, and there are none that specifically you could say yes, this proposal is contrary to that policy. I think C2. It's about large-scale purpose-built student accommodation, and it goes through the reasons why it wouldn't be acceptable, and none of them are applicable to this proposal. And I think that was spelled out in the original report.
Okay, in which case I will bring Councillor Pearce forward. You know the rules. I also would suggest that you don't really need to say a lot given the recommendation.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm not being quite as frequent flyer here as Councillor Vizard, but I'm getting almost up to the levels of sustainability that the bus services are delivering. My 3rd appearance in 19 months tonight. So I'm going to keep this really short. You voted to refuse last time. We've come back. That's what you're going to do tonight, is just refuse this application. I think it's worth bearing in mind. We had a lengthy debate. There were lots of really good contributions. It's pretty clear what the views of the local residents are about this scheme. And they were taken into account in the last application that you looked at. I think you should continue to take them into account tonight. I just have one comment to make really about the recommendation, the reasons for refusal that have been put forward. I think it talks directly about students in a way that I'm a touch uncomfortable with, really. You know, we wouldn't accept that kind of othering if we were talking about a group of retirees or people from, you know, anywhere else in the country. So I think what we need to focus on really, and it would be ideal if it could be altered to reflect that, is talking about people between the ages of 18 and 25, because we've got really good data from census as going back over 30 plus years that shows the makeup of St James Ward and the number of people in that age bracket and how it's dramatically increased, you know, up from 52% to over 60%. So that clearly shows the imbalance there. And I think that the council policies, you know, it's acknowledged that we struggle to find data to support that imbalance, but it's very clearly there. We can also look more widely at the whole city, where we've got a population of about 133,000, and we've got 35,000 students at the university. So it's pretty clear that the whole city, if we wanted to go down that route, is imbalanced because of the excessive, I would term, growth of the university since the cap on student numbers was removed by the Liberal Democrat Conservative coalition government 10 years ago. So again, it's always worth coming back to that and noting that that is the catalyst for all the challenges that we're facing with development in the city. The council, this planning committee, has done amazing work to try and mitigate some of those impacts over the years. But when government changes policy in such a dramatic fashion, particularly when they've campaigned, or part of that coalition campaign, to abolish tuition fees, and then got the sniff of a ministerial car and they did an about turn and trebled tuition fees, and then fair enough, Chair, thank you, cheers. I'll just leave you with that thought. Thank you.
Roger, I think you've got a response to the question that was asked. Yeah. Could I get the answer to the question that he pondered about the word student first of all, because I think that's quite.
I just want to briefly respond to that point about the students. And the report doesn't, well, sorry, the recommended reason for refusal doesn't actually say students, it says student housing. And I think, you know, that's what we were. It was clearly indicated to us by members at the last meeting that was their concern. In the event of appeal, you'd probably be able to expand on that to talk about the fact that most students are aged between 18 and 25. So to elaborate on your point.
Yeah, fair enough. Thank you, Roger.
No, absolutely.
Well, I think I just agree with Roger. I mean, the point is about the type of tenure, not the age, because older people can be students too. So it's not just young people, and I wouldn't want young people to be vilified for living in Exeter. So it's really about the type of tenure that I think is the issue. But thank you for your contribution, Councillor.
Any more questions? You can run away this time, Councillor. Okay. Could I have the objector, member of the public, the objector, which is Robin Connie? You did this last time, so you know you've got 3 minutes and have to switch on the machine, I hope. Oh, have you done that since we last saw you? That looks quite painful.
Firstly, sincere thanks for the consideration members gave the neighbourhood plan and before, and for voting overwhelmingly not to accept the recommendation for approval. But in the face of the threat of appeal, there's more to do if an embarrassing own goal by the council is to be avoided. None of us wants the report to damage the council's reputation, so firstly, its errors must be amended to satisfy legal requirements and national policy, and secondly, in order to provide a robust defence. I urge you to further consideration of specific neighbourhood plan policy clauses as reasons for refusal. So let's dive in. At 13 of the officer's report merely lists the NP under other material considerations. It must be moved up to recognise its statutory status as part of the development plan. Then, to show NPPF compliance, the report must include evidence of professional scrutiny against relevant neighbourhood plan policies, including consideration of the objections and claims of Exeter St James Forum as statutory consultee, with a rationale justifying officer conclusions in each case. Sections 3 and 17 indicate that no neighbourhood plan policy has even been considered when assessing this application. I come now to the matter of NPC2A, where the reported opinion of the applicant's barrister is the opposite of the forum's. To understand how such conflicting conclusions could be reached, I point to the report of Graham Self, the independent examiner for the draft neighbourhood plan. The authority of Mr. Self, FRTPI, should not be doubted. All planning inspectors are chartered town planners. Only 1 in 100 chartered town planners are awarded a fellowship in recognition of peer respect for their supreme competence. I stress this as the advice and conclusions offered in his report should win the respect of any planning inspector appointed for appeal. Mr. Self scrutinised and approved the wording of the draft policies C1, 2 and 3 without amendments, satisfied that decisions on planning applications should be easy to predict where these clauses were relevant. So how can the barrister be so confident while leaving so many incredulous? Well, Mr. Self also clarified in the report that supporting text, other policies and the overarching aims of a plan are expected to be used to help interpret specific policies. I defy anyone who reads the preamble to C2, as well as the policy itself, to reach any conclusion other than the clear non-compliance of this application to C2A, and to recognise that the barrister must have misread the policy and overlooked the preamble. C1E does not permit the change of use of any property to HMO where it undermines the maintenance of a balanced and mixed local community. Significantly, Mr. Self hailed this policy as a sensible approach to the local issue of community balance and had no concerns with the wording. This PBSA comprises 4 HMOs according to government definition, and as there is undeniably an over-concentration already in the vicinity, the proposal is non-compliant with NPC1A. For the sake of robustness and accuracy, I urge you to cite C2A and also C1E as additional reasons for refusal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please can you tell me what policy C1E is?
C1E, yes, I can read it for you if you like. Houses in multiple occupation. Changes of use to houses in multiple occupation will not be permitted unless, it's a bit small, the proposal would not result in an over-concentration of HMOs in any one area of the ward to the extent that it would change the character of the area or undermine the maintenance of a balanced and mixed local community.
Thank you very much. The other topic is sorry. Yeah.
Am I able to comment on the neighbourhood plan policies? Thank you. Policy C1 of the neighbourhood plan specifically says, it's just been read out, but it's about change of use of houses. This proposal isn't for a house, so it doesn't apply at all, C1. And C2 is concerned with integrating large-scale purpose-built student accommodation into the urban area, and it goes through 3 reasons why that may or may not be acceptable.
Please be quiet, thank you. No, because the question's not being asked about we're getting information from the officers at that moment.
And as we went through this at the meeting last time, but the 3 parts of policy C2 relate to intact streets being damaged, about servicing and parking arrangements being unacceptable, and the scale and massing of the design. And clearly, it's hard to identify any of this proposal as being contrary to any of those. So it's really difficult. We looked at this really carefully. It's really difficult to cite specific neighbourhood plan policies in a reason for refusal. If we went to appeal, an inspector would look and say, well, it does comply with those policies, so it wouldn't be a reason. We understand the neighbourhood plan overarching intentions, and that's mentioned in the reason for refusal, so we can draw on these issues in the event of an appeal, but I don't think it would be wise to incorporate those 2 policies into the reason for refusal. Having said that, I would be happy for it to be minuted that the neighbourhood plan forms part of the development plan.
Try again now. Speaking in favour of the application is Sam Williams.
Any button? I'm going to have an uphill battle here. We'll give it a go. I'm the owner of the site at Howell Road. At committee, the site was recommended for approval. Some members disagreed with Roger and requested that he comes back with a reason for refusal to reflect their own opinions. As discussed, that sole reason is policy H5B of the local plan, balance of communities. Without fail, every time the council has fought an appeal on the issue of imbalance in PBSA, they have lost. Councils have to be consistent in their decision making. This month, the council approved 107-bed PBSA only 350 metres from my site. In the report, the officer stated, the City Council does not currently define community imbalance in any planning documents. The lack of definition makes it impossible to provide evidence that the proposals fail to comply with policy H5. They also confirmed an ongoing need for student accommodation. In the planning appeal loss of 2019, the Secretary of State said that local opposition is not itself sufficient grounds to withhold planning permission for student accommodation in Exeter. The St James Trust does not represent everybody. Their members don't even make up 1% of the board. Many of the immediate neighbours to the site support my application. The vast majority of residents in the city put their trust in the process. They trust in the opinions of the experts, i.e. the planning officers. They trust that those opinions will be questioned by members, but decisions will be made with an open mind and one that reflects the needs of all residents in the ward and the city. This includes the needs of students. As discussed, at committee, Roger confirmed he finds no negatives arising from the development and only positives. He confirmed the development accords to all policies in the neighbourhood plan. He confirmed the head of planning policy and the head of legal in agreement with him. Decisions have to be made against policy and not just who is shouting loudest in the room. Being on planning committee is a privileged and powerful position. If members are minded to refuse the application, it's important to know why. Why do members disagree with Roger's views? What information and data do they hold that is not in the public domain? Why they're in disagreement with their own experts? The upcoming Article 4 review expressly does not relate to PBSA. Currently, everyone in the city is being canvassed by parties you represent. Without fail, the message is that you are the ones to be prudent with taxpayers' money. You are the ones who won't be wasteful. Yet here we are looking at an expensive appeal for a policy compliance scheme on a matter the council have consistently lost on and openly acknowledged as flawed. In reality, this is a good scheme, the result of years of collaboration with the planning department. Every single change requested has been accommodated. To allay members' concerns about the management of the site, I'm happy to include a warden's flat. This has reduced the overall numbers by 1. We can also condition quarterly management meetings with any neighbourhood groups. I trust with the addition of a warden's flat and the knowledge of imbalanced planning history, you can now support the scheme.
Thank you very much. Does anybody? Councillor Moore. Thank you. Can you just clarify which scheme you're referring to? Is it the one in it was in Norfolk Street that was granted under permitted development rights?
It's the one on Beaufort House, New North Road.
Oh, you're on the corner. The
Yeah.
one that's approved under permitted development rights.
It was granted under delegated development rights. Councillor Pearce and Councillor Mitchell were there when the decision was made.
Yeah. I don't think it's permitted. I think it was delegated.
Thank you.
Right, no further questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, just on a moment of clarity, and I think this needs to be made. The planning committee, and bearing in mind I voted for the application, the planning committee are here through democracy because decisions aren't made through officers. So we're within our rights to disagree with officers, even if they may think we're mad for doing so. So moving forward, I'd like to propose. Oh, Councillor Mitchell, I completely forgot about you. I'm so sorry. Sorry. I feel really bad.
I live nearby. It might affect my welfare. As the Chair has already said, we're not here to rehearse the points made at previous meetings. Members came to a clear view and request a report to support the points made by many people at the previous meeting. The reasons for refusal should, I believe, both relate to the local plan and the neighbourhood plan. The parallel untested planning case for this is 16/0603 36 to 38 Wells Street, which was for a PBSA development on a garage site, similar garage site in an urban setting, and 2 reasons for refusal were given: the local plan 5HB, which is one Roger stated in his report today, and also policy C2A, page 27 of the neighbourhood plan. They are both there, both in the document. The second point in the refusal relating to the road hold application is mentioned, as Roger has already suggested, is there in general terms. So if the matter did go to appeal, we can pull in, the authority can pull in evidence from the plan if they wish at that stage to support their arguments. The community I represent with my 2 ward colleagues do feel strongly about the concept of community balance, which forms a key element of the St James neighbourhood plan. Until there's a specific appeal relating to the use of 5HB in our local plan and 2CA of the neighbourhood plan, we lack clarity, and this is where the argument is taking place at the moment. But I do ask local members, all members, to support your own local plan, which states 5HB there, and it's been there since 2012, and support the St James neighbourhood plan in relation to the evidence they believe support this refusal in relation to 2CA and also 2C1E that's already been mentioned as well. That these plans should be supported by us as representatives of the community to show that we have respect for our own documents, which are of course statutory documents. And thank Councillor Pearce for his comments about student numbers. I would point out that Tony Blair did insist on 50% plus attending. Thank you. Oh, sorry, just in case.
Oh, that ruined your mic drop, didn't it, Michael?
Anybody got any questions for Councillor Mitchell? Okay, thank you very much.
Now do your mic drop.
Right. So I'm going to move the recommendation to refuse for the reasons contained in the report. All those in favour, can you raise your hands? All those against? And I'm going to abstain given my previous opinion on the application, as is Councillor Lights, it turns out. In which case, we've only got 2 more things left. Well, 3, sorry. 2 more things left. So that is the list of decisions made and withdrawn applications. Were there any questions notified to any of the officers?
Nothing notified, Chair.
Thank you very much. And the appeals report, Roger?
Again, not been notified of any questions. It appears that on my version of this anyway, agenda item 10 and agenda item 11 are the appeals report, and they're identical. So you can ignore
what
one.
went wrong there. Mine doesn't say that. And the agenda item. Oh, hello. Yeah.
It's a generic question, but where, having looked at the inspector's reports on the defects on a ward, which we lost, what reflection do you as a team take of appeals decisions, and how does that inform you, or how does it inform us as members that we get feedback on these besides just a report? If some of them do have policy implications.
Yeah, that's a very good question. The summary that you see is circulated to all members of the development management planning officers and the policy team as well. And there's very often a discussion at a weekly team meeting about the implications of that, in the interest of making sure that all the relevant officers are aware of the decision and can make sure that their future decisions are consistent with it, or if they don't feel able to be consistent with it, they raise it with their manager. So we do our best to learn from the decisions.
And also the chair, I don't know if the vice chair, but the chair gets a copy of every appeal decision as well first. Yeah, and it's lovely. They write little reports for us as well, so we understand what's inside it. So it is used as a learning tool for all of us. And the final thing on the agenda is the site inspection party, which is Tuesday the 11th of April. You know, we had 2 last time, so who knows, I might count. And it is the absolute dream team of me, Councillor Mitchell and Councillor Newby. And the next meeting will be held on Monday the 24th of April. At County Hall, yes, sorry, that's what I meant to tell you. I don't know, something to do with elections apparently. So we'll all be at County Hall.